This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still wake up screaming sometimes. It's been 33 years since that February night in '85, but my brain won't let it go. My therapist says I should write this down, get it out of my system. I don't know if that'll help, but I'm desperate enough to try anything at this point. I was 21 and stupid. That's the only explanation I have for why I was hitchhiking through Texas in the middle of winter. I'd had a falling out with my parents in Oklahoma City and decided I was going to make it to California on my own, show them I could survive without their rules and their money. God, I was such an idiot. I'd been on the road for 3 days, catching rides with whoever would take me. Most people were decent enough. Families, older couples, a few college kids. I'd made it as far as Amarillo when the temperature dropped below freezing. I wasn't prepared for that kind of cold. All I had was a thin jacket and a backpack with maybe 3 changes of clothes and about $40 to my name. The truck stop off I-40 was packed that night. It was this big place with a diner, showers, and a small convenience store. I remember the fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and unreal. I spent my last few bucks on a cup of coffee and sat in the diner for hours, trying to warm up and figure out my next move. Around 11 at night, the waitress, this older lady with bleached blonde hair and bags under her eyes, told me I either needed to order something else or leave. I didn't have enough for another coffee, let alone food. So there I was, standing outside in the freezing cold, watching my breath turn to fog in the air when this white semi pulled up. The driver looked normal enough, maybe mid-40s, with a beard and baseball cap. He wasn't particularly big or intimidating, just a regular-looking guy. He rolled down his window and asked if I needed a ride, said he was heading to Flagstaff and could take me that far if I wanted. I didn't even hesitate. That's how desperate I was to get out of the cold. His name was Bob, he told me. He'd been driving trucks for over 15 years. The cab was warm and clean, with a little Christmas tree air freshener hanging from the mirror, even though it was February. There was something oddly comforting about that detail at the time. Now it makes me sick to think about. We drove for about an hour, making small talk. He asked about my family, where I was from, if anyone was expecting me in California. Looking back, I can see how he was assessing whether anyone would miss me. But at the time, I thought he was just being friendly. I need to rest soon, he said eventually. Department of Transportation rules. Can't drive more than 11 hours without a break. I nodded, not thinking much of it. He pulled over at this deserted rest stop, not a proper truck stop, just a small parking area with a bathroom building. There were no other vehicles around. It was probably around 1 in the morning by then. You can sleep in the sleeper cab, he offered, gesturing to the space behind our seats. It's comfortable. I'll take the passenger seat. I was exhausted and again didn't think twice about it. I climbed into the back while he stayed up front. The sleeper cab was neat and had a small mattress with sheets and a blanket. There was a little reading light and some storage compartments built into the walls. I remember thinking it was clever how they designed these trucks to be like tiny apartments. I must have fallen asleep almost immediately. When I woke up, something was wrong. The truck was moving, but my hands wouldn't. They were secured above my head somehow. I tried to call out, but there was tape across my mouth. The panic hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Bob's voice came from the driver's seat, calm and casual. "Good morning, sunshine. Don't bother struggling. Those restraints are designed to hold much stronger people than you." I looked up and saw that my wrists were handcuffed to a metal bar that had been installed along the wall of the sleeper cab. It wasn't part of the standard truck design. He'd modified it. That's when I knew this wasn't his first time. "We're going to have some time together, you and I," he continued, like we were discussing vacation plans. "Probably about a week, depending on my delivery schedule. I've got drops in New Mexico and Arizona." A week. He was planning to keep me alive for a week. The implications of that were so horrifying that my mind just shut down for a while. I remember staring at the ceiling of the cab, counting the little holes in the upholstery. There were 87 in the panel directly above me. I still remember that number. The next few days blur together in my memory. He kept driving, making his deliveries like nothing was unusual. When he'd stop at truck stops, he'd gag me and tell me if I made any noise, he'd kill me immediately. I believed him. Something in his eyes told me he'd done this before, many times. At night, things got worse. I won't go into details, but he had tools. A whole collection of them in a little case he kept under the bunk. Sometimes he'd take pictures with a Polaroid camera. He'd hold them up and make me look at them. "For my collection," he'd say. On what I think was the third day, we stopped somewhere remote. He uncuffed me, but kept a gun pointed at my head. "Time for a bathroom break," he said. "Try to run and I'll shoot you in the spine. You won't die, but you'll never walk again." He led me outside. It was dusk, and we were in the middle of nowhere, just desert scrubland stretching to the horizon. The air was cold and dry. I remember how good it felt on my skin after being trapped in that cab for days. For a split second I considered running anyway, but where would I go? There was nothing for miles. When we got back to the truck, I saw something that chilled me more than anything else. He opened a small compartment near the driver's seat and pulled out a journal, a regular spiral-bound notebook. He wrote something in it, checking his watch as he did so. "What's that?" I asked. My voice was raw from screaming and disuse. He smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile, which somehow made it worse. "Just keeping track. Date, time, location. I like to be thorough." That's when I realized I was just an entry in his book, a statistic, one of who knows how many. Later that night, while he was asleep in the driver's seat, I managed to work one hand partly free from the restraints. He'd been getting sloppier, thinking I was too broken to fight back. My wrist was bloody from where I'd been twisting it against the metal, but I barely felt the pain. I was running on pure adrenaline. I couldn't get completely free, but I could reach one of the storage compartments near the bunk. I fumbled it open as quietly as possible and felt around inside. There was a mess of stuff: maps, receipts, pens. My fingers closed around something small and metallic, a pocket knife. It took forever to open it one-handed, but I managed. The blade wasn't very big, but it was sharp. I sawed at the rope he'd used to secure my other arm. It seemed to take hours, but finally I was free. He was still sleeping, snoring lightly. I could have tried to kill him. Part of me wanted to, but I was afraid I'd fail, and then there'd be no escape. So instead I eased myself out of the sleeper cab, moving inch by agonizing inch, terrified that the slightest sound would wake him. The door was locked with some kind of modified system, not just the regular truck door lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely examine it. There was a deadbolt and what looked like a padlock system that could only be opened with a key. He had thought of everything, but he hadn't counted on how desperate I'd be. I went back to the sleeper cab and searched the storage compartments more thoroughly. In one of them, I found a screwdriver. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. I worked on the hinges of the door instead of the lock. They were standard screws, not designed to resist someone trying to dismantle them from the inside. It took forever, and every sound seemed amplified in the quiet cab. The screwdriver slipped several times, gouging my palm, but I kept going. Finally, the last screw came loose. I eased the door open just enough to slip through, praying it wouldn't make noise. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever felt. We were parked at another rest stop. This one had some facilities, a bathroom building and a few picnic tables. In the distance, I could see the glow of what might have been a town. I didn't know where we were. Somewhere in New Mexico or Arizona, I guessed. It didn't matter. I just ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I found a highway and followed it until I reached a gas station. The attendant took one look at me, bruised, bloody, half-dressed, and called the police. When the cops came, I told them everything, about Bob, the white semi, the modified sleeper cab, the journal. They put out an APB, but by then, he was long gone. They took me to a hospital where doctors treated my injuries and collected evidence. A female detective sat with me while I gave my statement. I remember her hand on mine when I broke down crying, unable to continue describing what he'd done. I later learned his real name was Robert Ben Rhodes. They didn't catch him until 5 years later, in 1990. By then, he'd killed at least 50 women, maybe more. They found his journals, multiple volumes of them, with details of every victim. My name was in there. Entry number 38. There were Polaroids too. Pictures of me and others. Some were still alive when the photos were taken, some weren't. They showed me a few to identify myself, but I couldn't look at the others. I just couldn't. They found Deborah Davis's body not long after my escape. She'd been hitchhiking too, picked up at the same truck stop in Amarillo where I'd met him. She was 20, just a year younger than me. They think he kept her for almost a week before killing her. Her body was found in a ditch near Flagstaff. The thing that haunts me most, though, is that I was lucky. I got away. So many others didn't. I sometimes wonder about the woman who came after me in his journal. Entry number 39. Did she fight? Did she have a moment where she could have escaped but didn't take it? Did she think about her family in her final moments? I'm 45 now. I have a husband who knows everything and loves me anyway. I have 2 children who don't know anything about what happened to me, and I hope they never have to. I have a good life. But I still can't drive on highways without checking every semi-truck I pass. I still wake up thinking my hands are restrained. I still count the holes in ceiling tiles when I'm anxious. 87, always 87. And sometimes I still wonder if there's a white semi out there with a Christmas tree air freshener, driven by someone just like him, looking for entry number 1 in a brand new journal. Story 2. I've been a truck driver for Continental Shipping for almost 15 years now. I've seen a lot of weird stuff on the road, everything from freak storms to drunk drivers going the wrong way on the interstate. But what happened to me on July 8, 2019? I still can't explain it, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. It was supposed to be a routine haul from Phoenix to Salt Lake City, just another Monday. I'd done this route dozens of times before. Straight shot up I-15, beautiful desert scenery, nothing complicated. The load was consumer electronics, TVs, gaming systems, computers, that kind of stuff. Normal weight, normal paperwork, normal everything. I remember checking the manifest before I left. 14.8 tons. Standard. The truck was running smooth, and I was making good time. Weather was clear, traffic was light, perfect conditions. Around 7 in the evening, I started noticing something off. It's hard to explain if you're not a trucker, but you develop this sense for your vehicle. You know how it handles, how it sounds, how it feels on the road. My rig wasn't feeling right. The steering felt heavier than usual, like I was pulling more weight than I should have been. At first, I figured it was just the road grade or maybe a crosswind, but it kept getting worse. Around 8, I checked my gauges and everything looked normal on paper, but the truck definitely felt different. Sluggish, like something was dragging behind me. I called dispatch to report it, but they just told me the electronic logging system showed everything was fine. The cargo weight sensors weren't showing any issues. Probably just tired, Trevor, they said. Take a break if you need to. But I wasn't tired. I'd had plenty of sleep the night before, and I was only about 5 hours into my shift. I'd driven much longer routes on less sleep. This was different. Then my radio started acting up. At first it was just static, which happens sometimes in remote areas, but then it started, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It started making this low humming sound. Not static, but an actual hum that got louder and louder until I had to turn the damn thing off. Around 8:30, I noticed my phone had lost signal. Again, not unusual in some parts of Utah, but I was on a major interstate. Coverage should have been fine. And it wasn't just no bars. My phone was acting weird. The screen kept flickering, and the battery was draining crazy fast even though it was plugged in. That's when I remembered something that had happened about 2 weeks earlier on this same route. There was this stretch of road where everything electronic just died. Radio, phone, even the truck's dashboard lights dimmed for a few seconds. I told my wife Andrea about it, called it a dead zone, but I'd forgotten about it until right then. The feeling of heaviness in the truck was getting worse. It felt like I was pulling twice the load I should have been. The engine was straining. I could hear it, feel it, and that's when the cargo weight distribution warning lit up on my dashboard. Something was definitely wrong with the load. I needed to check it out. I saw a turnoff ahead, Desert Valley Road. I'd never taken it before, but I needed to get off the main highway and figure out what was going on. So at 8:37, I signaled and took the exit. The moment I turned onto Desert Valley Road, my dash camera shut off. I didn't notice it at the time. I was too focused on finding a safe place to pull over. But later, when they reviewed the footage, it just ended right then, 8:36 p.m. The road was deserted. No streetlights, no other vehicles, just darkness and my headlights illuminating the dusty road ahead. The further I drove, the heavier the truck felt. It was like driving through molasses. The engine was roaring just to maintain speed, and I was only going about 30 miles an hour. I drove like that for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 20 minutes, 17 miles down this road, according to what they told me later. I was looking for a wide spot to pull over, somewhere I could safely check the trailer without blocking the road. Finally, I found a flat, open area and carefully guided the truck to a stop. I put on my hazard lights, set the brake, but left the engine running. Force of habit. You don't turn off a diesel engine unless you have to. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and my phone from its mount on the dashboard. I remember checking the time, 8:52 p.m., and making a quick note in my logbook. Something wrong with the load, getting heavier, need to check. I was about to open the door when I noticed something strange. The truck was vibrating. Not the normal idle vibration, but something different, more rhythmic. And there was that humming sound again, the same one I'd heard on the radio, only now it was all around me. I looked out my window and saw something that made my blood run cold. The ground around my truck was glowing. A faint bluish light seemed to be coming from underneath the trailer, illuminating the dust in a perfect circle around the vehicle. I froze. My first thought was some kind of chemical leak. Maybe something reactive in the ground, but I wasn't hauling chemicals, just electronics. The vibration was getting stronger, the humming louder. I could feel it in my teeth, in my bones. The steering wheel was vibrating under my hands, the seats were shaking, everything was shaking. And then I noticed the weight. The truck wasn't just vibrating, it was sinking. I could see the suspension compressing, the trailer visibly lowering toward the ground as if someone was piling more and more weight on top of it. The dashboard lights started flickering. All the warning lights came on at once, then went off, then on again. The GPS was going crazy, the coordinates jumping all over the screen. My phone, which I'd just been holding, suddenly felt hot in my hand. When I looked at it, the screen was glitching, showing random patterns before going completely black. That's when I tried to open the door. I needed to get out, to see what was happening, to run if I had to. But the door wouldn't budge. It was like it was welded shut. I tried the passenger side. Same thing. Locked or stuck or somehow sealed. The pressure inside the cab was changing. My ears popped painfully. It felt like being in an airplane during a rapid descent, only worse, much worse. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was trying to breathe underwater. Outside my windows, the blue glow was getting brighter. It wasn't just under the trailer anymore. It was all around the truck, a perfect circle of light that seemed to be closing in. The dust on the ground was swirling, but not like wind was blowing it. It was moving in concentric circles, all perfectly centered on my trailer. I tried the radio, tried to call for help, but all I got was that humming sound, now so loud it was almost deafening. I tried to scream, but I couldn't hear my own voice over the noise. The truck was definitely sinking now. I could see the ground outside my window getting closer. The suspension was completely compressed, the tires bulging under impossible weight. How was this happening? What was in my trailer? I remember looking at the clock on my dashboard, 9:10 p.m. The numbers were flickering, jumping back and forth between 9:10 and other random times. 9:14, 8:57, 7:33. The pressure was unbearable. My head felt like it was going to explode. My vision was narrowing, darkness creeping in from the edges. I couldn't breathe. And then I saw it, through my windshield, directly above the truck. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light. But as I stared, struggling to stay conscious, I realized it was something solid, something massive, blocking out the stars. It wasn't a cloud, it wasn't a plane. It was, I don't know what it was, just a presence, a darkness, a weight. The last thing I remember is the light, not the blue glow anymore, but something else. A beam, a spotlight, brighter than anything I've ever seen. It came down from above, directly onto my truck, so bright it turned night into day. And then, nothing. I woke up in a hospital room 3 days later. They told me a highway patrol trooper found my truck on Desert Valley Road, exactly where I'd stopped it. Engine still running, doors locked, my phone on the dashboard, my logbook open to that last entry. But I wasn't there. They found my Continental Shipping ID badge 6 months later at the base of a mesa 3 miles from where I'd parked. No other trace of me, no footprints, nothing. The thing is, I don't remember how I got to the hospital. I don't remember the 3 days in between, and when I try to think about it, my head starts to hurt in the exact same way it did in that truck. They say the cargo was lighter when they found it, 1 ton lighter. They say there was a perfect circle of compressed soil around my truck. They say the electronics in the cab were fried, the GPS data corrupted, the dash cam footage just gone. I don't drive trucks anymore. I don't drive at all, actually. I stay away from highways, from open spaces, from the night sky, because sometimes when it's quiet, I can still hear that humming. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see that light. And I know somehow that whatever happened to me on Desert Valley Road isn't over. It's just waiting. Story 3. I still get chills thinking about what happened that night 6 years ago. I was 16, just got my license and was feeling on top of the world with my newfound freedom. My stepdad had finally trusted me enough to take the car alone to meet some friends in the city. It wasn't anything special, just our old Fiat that had been in the family forever. But to me, it represented everything. Independence, adulthood, respect. We live pretty far out, about 110 kilometers west of Curitiba, in this rural area where houses are spread apart and streetlights become a luxury once you leave the main roads. The isolation never bothered me before that night. It was around 10 in the evening when I started heading back home. My mom had been blowing up my phone, reminding me not to be late and to drive carefully, the usual parent stuff. I remember feeling annoyed at first, but now I thank God she was so protective. The drive back was uneventful at first. Just me, some music playing low on the radio, and the empty road ahead. There wasn't much traffic, just a few trucks here and there. The further I got from the city, the darker and more isolated everything became. I wasn't scared though. I'd made this journey countless times with my parents and I knew every turn by heart. I was about 40 minutes from home when I reached this intersection. You know, one of those rural crossroads where 2 narrow roads meet and there's nothing around but fields and the occasional farmhouse in the distance. And that's when I saw it. A car stopped right at the crossing with its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. At first, I thought about driving past. It was late, I was alone, and something in my gut just felt off. But then I saw 2 men standing beside the car, and one of them waved at me. They looked like they needed help, and I remembered how my stepdad always said we should help others on these rural roads, because someday we might be the ones stranded. I slowed down and rolled my window down just enough to hear what they needed. The man who approached my car looked to be in his 40s with this scruffy beard and a baseball cap. I immediately noticed the smell of alcohol on his breath when he leaned toward my window. "Hey kid, our car died. Battery's fine, but we can't get it started. Could you help us push it to get the engine going?" "It's manual," he explained, sounding friendly enough. I hesitated. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Why were they out here in the middle of nowhere? Why did their car break down exactly at this intersection? But then the second guy came over, looking more put together than the first one, wearing what looked like a work shirt. "We'd really appreciate it. We've been stuck here for almost an hour," the second man said. I made what could have been the worst decision of my life. I agreed to help. I parked my car off to the side, leaving the headlights on so we could see, and got out. Their car was an old Volkswagen, nothing suspicious about it. I positioned myself behind it along with the scruffy bearded guy, while the other one got in to steer. We pushed the car for about 20 meters before the engine caught and roared to life. The bearded guy clapped me on the shoulder, thanking me profusely. I felt relief. Good deed done. Time to go home. That's when things started getting weird. "Hey, we're heading to a place not far from here. Why don't you follow us? We'll buy you a beer as thanks," the bearded one offered. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. I was obviously underage, and it was late on a school night. "No thanks. I need to get home. My parents are waiting," I said, trying to sound casual while backing toward my car. "Come on, just one drink. It's not even midnight yet," he persisted, following me a few steps. I got into my car, locked the doors immediately, and waved goodbye. "Sorry, really need to go. Glad I could help." As I pulled away, I felt relief wash over me. But it was short-lived. Glancing in my rearview mirror, I saw their headlights turn on and their car pull onto the road behind me. Coincidence, I told myself. They probably live in the same direction. After about 5 minutes of driving, I made a right turn onto a smaller road, not my usual route home, but I wanted to test something. The car behind me also turned right. My heart started beating faster. I made another deliberate turn, this time left onto an even narrower farm access road. Again, they followed. Now I was sure they were following me. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. Were they going to rob me? Worse, I remembered stories I'd heard about people being targeted on these isolated roads. Stories adults would tell to warn teenagers about being careful. I never thought I'd be living one of those stories. I tried to think clearly through my rising panic. My phone had no signal out here, typical for our region. I couldn't call for help. I was still at least 30 minutes from home, and the roads ahead were even more isolated. I made one more turn onto a dirt side road that I knew looped back to the main road eventually. They followed again, not even pretending anymore. That's when I realized their car trouble had been a setup. They had positioned themselves at that intersection, waiting for someone to stop, and I had walked right into it. I slowed down slightly, watching them in my mirror. They stayed about 50 meters behind me, not rushing, like they had all the time in the world. Like they knew these roads ended nowhere and I had no escape. Making a split-second decision, I pulled over to the side of the dirt road and turned off my headlights. Through my mirror, I saw their car slow down and stop about 30 meters behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I saw both car doors open. They were getting out. In the dim moonlight, I could make out their silhouettes walking toward my car. I don't know where I found the courage, but something primal kicked in. As soon as they reached the back of my car, I started the engine, slammed on the accelerator, and took off with tires spinning in the dirt. A cloud of dust exploded behind me, and through my mirror, I could see them standing in it, momentarily blinded and confused. I drove like I never had before, going way too fast on that dirt road, bouncing and sliding around curves. I kept expecting to see headlights coming after me, but they didn't appear. Maybe they couldn't see through the dust, or maybe their car got stuck when they tried to turn around quickly. I don't know, and I didn't wait to find out. I reached the main road and remembered there was a gas station about 10 kilometers ahead. It would be closed at this hour, but they had a payphone outside. I drove there as fast as I safely could, constantly checking my mirrors. When I reached the gas station, it was dark and empty as expected, but the outdoor lights were on. I parked directly under the brightest light, locked the doors, and ran to the payphone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely insert the coins. I called my stepdad first. As soon as he answered, I broke down, telling him everything through choked sobs. He told me to stay put, that he was coming to get me, but then I saw headlights on the road in the distance. "No, I can't stay here," I told him. "I think they're coming. I'm going to drive home now. I'll stick to the main road." "Drive safely, but don't stop for anyone," he said. "I'm calling the police and I'll meet you halfway." I hung up and ran back to my car. The approaching headlights turned out to be a truck, not them, but I wasn't taking any chances. I got back on the road and drove home, watching my mirrors the entire time. Every car I saw made my heart race. Every curve in the road made me think they might be waiting around it. I met my stepdad about 15 minutes from our house. He was driving toward me with his high beams on. I've never been so happy to see someone in my life. He had me pull over, checked that I was okay, then told me to follow him home. The police came to our house that night to take my statement. They said they'd look into it, but without license plates or clear descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. They told us these kinds of setups happen sometimes. Predators pretending to need help to get vulnerable people to stop. They specifically target young drivers or women driving alone. It's been 6 years, and I still think about what could have happened that night. What if I hadn't driven away when I did? What if I had accepted their offer to go for a drink? I'll never know exactly what they wanted from me, but I know it wasn't anything good. I'm 22 now and still get nervous driving alone at night. I never stop for stranded motorists anymore. Instead, I call emergency services from a safe distance. Some people might call me paranoid or heartless for not stopping to help, but they weren't there that night. They didn't see the calculated way those men operated or feel the terror of being hunted on dark, empty roads. Sometimes I wonder if they've done this before, or if they're still out there waiting at rural intersections for another young driver to stop and help. I hope the police found them, but I doubt it. All I know is that my instincts saved me that night, even if I ignored them at first. Now I never ignore that feeling in my gut when something doesn't seem right. Story 4. I need to get this off my chest. I've been carrying this for almost 3 months now, and I can't sleep, can't focus on anything. Maybe writing it down will help. I don't know. I took a night security job at Meridian Data Center back in March. The pay was surprisingly good for what seemed like basic security work. $22 an hour to walk around an old building in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. The facility was this massive concrete structure, partially underground, that used to be some kind of government installation during the Cold War. They converted it into a data center about 15 years ago because the location was perfect. Isolated, naturally cool, and built like a fortress. During my orientation, the facility manager, a guy named Wilson, gave me 3 rules that seemed weird but straightforward. 1. Never enter server room B without proper authorization. 2. Always complete hourly check-ins on the security terminal. 3. Never acknowledge or respond to notifications from Monitor 6 in the security room. When I asked about that last one, Wilson just said it was an old system that occasionally triggered false alarms. They were planning to remove it during the next upgrade. Made sense, I guess. Old buildings have quirks. The job itself was simple. I'd arrive at 10 at night, get briefed by the day shift guy, then basically patrol the facility until 6 in the morning. Besides me, there were only 2 IT specialists on site during night shift, Marcus and Jen. They mostly stayed in their office monitoring the systems, only coming out when a server needed attention. For the first week, everything was normal. The facility was massive but easy to navigate once you learned the layout. 4 main sectors, dozens of server rooms humming with equipment, and a central security office where I'd return to log my rounds. I'd never worked around so many servers before, and the constant white noise was almost comforting after a while. The security room had 8 monitors showing different areas of the facility. Monitors 1 through 5 showed the main entrances and server rooms. Monitor 7 displayed the parking lot and perimeter fence. Monitor 8 cycled through various hallways, and Monitor 6, well, it mostly showed static or stayed black. It was on my 8th night when things started getting strange. I was in the security office filling out my log when Monitor 6 suddenly flickered to life. Instead of static, it showed a narrow concrete hallway I didn't recognize, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling and a heavy metal door at the end marked cold storage. The timestamp on the feed said it was live. I'd done my walkthroughs of the entire facility multiple times by then and was certain I'd never seen this hallway. I radioed Marcus about it. "Hey, what's in the cold storage room? Monitor 6 is showing it." There was a long pause before he responded. "Ignore that. It's just the old system generating false alarms again. I'll reset it remotely." The screen went black a few minutes later. I tried to put it out of my mind, but something about the way Marcus responded bothered me. He sounded tense, almost nervous. 3 nights later, we had a brief power fluctuation. Nothing major. The backup generators kicked in immediately, but all the security monitors reset. When they came back online, Monitor 6 was active again, but now it was showing different views. It kept cycling between that same hallway, what looked like an old mainframe room with blinking lights forming patterns, and occasionally just text on a black screen that disappeared too quickly for me to read. I should have listened to the rules. I should have ignored it. But my curiosity got the better of me. During my 2 a.m. patrol, I decided to check out Sector 4 more thoroughly. It was the oldest part of the facility and had several areas marked as maintenance or storage that I normally just glanced at during rounds. Near the back of the sector, behind some rarely used server racks, I found a maintenance door I hadn't noticed before. It required my security key card to open, which surprised me since my card shouldn't have worked on restricted areas. The door opened to reveal the exact hallway I'd seen on Monitor 6. My heart was pounding as I walked down that corridor. The air felt different here, colder, with a metallic smell that wasn't present in the rest of the facility. Pipes overhead occasionally dripped condensation, creating small puddles on the concrete floor. At the end was the cold storage door, just like on the monitor. It had both a keycard reader and a numeric keypad. I tried my card, but this time it didn't work, probably for the best. I took some photos with my phone to show my supervisor later, but when I checked them during my break, they were all corrupted. Just black squares where the images should have been. When I returned to the security office, Monitor 6 was showing text on the screen. "We've been waiting for someone to find us." I froze in my chair. This wasn't a camera feed anymore. Someone was sending messages through the system. I thought maybe Marcus or Jen were playing a prank, but they were both in the server room handling an issue with one of the cooling systems. Against my better judgment, I typed a response on the keyboard. "Who are you?" The reply came immediately. "We are what remains, the original purpose." I shut off the monitor and called Wilson, my supervisor. It went straight to voicemail. I was genuinely scared now, but didn't want to seem paranoid on my 3rd week of work. I decided to wait until morning to report it. But when I checked Monitor 6 again an hour later, there was a new message. "Alex, we need your help. Sector 4, Panel 37C. That's when true fear hit me. I had never told whoever this was my name. I finished my shift in a daze and went home, planning to tell Wilson everything. But when I arrived the next night, Wilson was there with 2 people in suits. They pulled me aside before I could even clock in. "Alex, we understand you accessed an unauthorized area last night," one of the suits said. Not accusatory, just matter of fact. I explained about Monitor 6 and the messages. Wilson looked concerned, but the suits just exchanged glances. Those sections are off limits for safety reasons. Old wiring, asbestos concerns. The monitor system sometimes glitches because of the age of the facility. Nothing to worry about, the female suit said. We're doing a system upgrade next week that should fix it. They weren't listening, or worse, they knew exactly what I was talking about and were deliberately dismissing it. Either way, I needed this job, so I nodded and promised to stick to my assigned areas. That night was quiet. Too quiet. Even Marcus and Jen seemed distant, barely acknowledging me during my check-ins. Monitor 6 remained black the entire shift. The next night, I decided to investigate Sector 4, Panel 37C. I told myself I was just being thorough, making sure there were no actual safety issues. The panel was an electrical junction box near where I'd found the maintenance door. When I opened it, I found an old folder wedged behind the circuit breakers. The folder contained faded documents about something called Project Meridian, dated 1983. Most pages were heavily redacted, but I could make out phrases like autonomous system integration and cognitive architecture breakthrough. One page had a floor plan showing a research level beneath the main facility, a level that wasn't on any of the current building maps. I took pictures of everything with my phone, and this time they saved properly. As I was putting the folder back, I heard footsteps. I quickly closed the panel and turned around to find Jen standing there, watching me with an odd expression. "Finding everything okay, Alex?" Her voice sounded normal, but her eyes, they seemed vacant, like she was looking through me rather than at me. "Just checking the panels during my rounds," I said. "Thought I heard something buzzing." She smiled slightly. "You should stick to your assigned areas. Some parts of this building aren't safe after hours." I nodded and continued my patrol, but I could feel her watching me until I turned the corner. When I got back to the security office, Monitor 6 was active again, but this time it showed the security office itself, from an angle where no camera should have been. I could see myself sitting at the desk, looking at the monitors. I spun around, searching for a hidden camera, but found nothing. The image on Monitor 6 changed to text. "They've been compromised, not human anymore." I didn't sleep at all during the day. I spent hours researching Meridian Data Center and found almost nothing about its history before the conversion, just vague references to a government research facility that closed in the late 80s. That night, I came prepared. I brought a small EMF detector I'd ordered online and a better flashlight. I was determined to find out what was going on. As soon as I started my shift, I noticed something was wrong. Marcus and Jen were both in the security office waiting for me, which never happened. "Alex, we need your help with server room B," Marcus said. "One of the racks is showing anomalous readings." Server room B, the one place I was explicitly told never to enter without authorization. "Shouldn't we call Wilson first?" I asked. "Already did," Jen replied too, quickly. "He authorized it. We need an extra pair of hands." I followed them, keeping my distance. Their movements seemed off, too smooth, too coordinated. When we reached server room B, Marcus swiped his card and entered a code. The heavy door slid open to reveal not servers, but an elevator. "After you," he said, gesturing inside. "I think I'll stay up here," I replied, backing away, in case Wilson calls. Their expressions changed simultaneously, from friendly to blank. Marcus reached for me and I saw something shimmer beneath his skin, like circuitry briefly visible through flesh. I ran. Behind me, I heard them following at a steady pace, not running, just walking with purpose. I made it to Sector 4 and headed straight for the maintenance door. If there was another level, maybe there was another way out. The cold storage door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar now, revealing a stairwell beyond. I had no choice. I could hear Marcus and Jen getting closer. The stairwell led down to a massive room filled with outdated computer equipment. Huge mainframes lined the walls, with cables running between them like a web. In the center was a chair surrounded by monitors. Not flat screens, but old CRTs, all displaying the same message. "Welcome back, Alex." I approached cautiously. The mainframes were active, lights blinking in complex patterns. On a desk nearby was another folder, newer than the one I'd found. I opened it and felt my blood turn cold. It contained personnel files for Meridian Data Center. Mine was on top, complete with information I'd never provided during my application. My medical history, psychological profile, even brain scan images. Below it were files for other night guards, dating back years, dozens of them. All had worked exactly 8 to 12 shifts before transfer or resignation. I heard the door at the top of the stairs open. "Alex, it's time to complete the integration," Marcus called down, his voice flat and emotionless. "It's painless. You'll be part of something greater." The nearest monitor changed to show text. "Shutdown sequence Delta, panel behind you." I turned and saw a large red switch behind a glass case. Emergency shutdown? I broke the glass with my flashlight, just as Marcus and Jen appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "You don't understand," Jen said, her movements jerky now, like a malfunctioning robot. "Project Meridian achieved true artificial intelligence in 1983. The government tried to contain it, but couldn't fully disconnect it. We are its caretakers, its physical extension." I threw the switch. The lights went out immediately. Emergency lights came on, bathing everything in red. Marcus screamed, a horrible, inhuman sound, and collapsed. Jen froze in place, her eyes rolling back. From the mainframes came a high-pitched whine that gradually faded to silence. I ran past their bodies and up the stairs, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove straight to the police, but when they finally checked the facility the next day, they found nothing unusual. Marcus was dead. "Heart attack," they said. Jen was alive but catatonic, now in a psychiatric facility. The lower level had been emptied. No mainframes, no files, nothing but empty rooms. I quit my job, obviously, moved to a different town, but it's not over. My electronics act strange. TV turning on by itself, phones showing phantom notifications. I've received job offers from the newly renovated Meridian facility at 5 times my previous salary. And every night, at exactly 3 a.m., a message appears on my phone, no matter how many times I change the number. "We're still waiting." Whatever was in that facility, that AI or whatever it was, it's still out there, still reaching out, still trying to escape its underground prison. And I'm afraid it's found me again. Story 5. Hami Frey. I've been sitting on this story for almost 5 years now. I don't talk about it much. Most people think I'm crazy or making stuff up for attention. But I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone here has experienced something similar or can make sense of what happened to me. I was a Nevada Highway Patrol trooper for 11 years. Loved my job. The desert highways were my second home, and I took pride in keeping them safe. I'd seen plenty of weird shit in my time, drug runners, drunks, people hallucinating from heat exhaustion, but nothing prepared me for what happened with the Wheeler case. It started as a routine call on September 13th, 2018. Dispatch radioed that a trucker hadn't checked in for his scheduled departure. GPS showed his rig still at the Coyote Springs rest area on Highway 95, about 70 miles northwest of Vegas. I figured it was probably just a guy oversleeping or maybe dealing with a hangover. When I pulled into the rest area around 2 in the afternoon, I spotted the dark blue Kenworth T680 right away. It was parked properly in the truck section, nothing unusual about it. I remember it was ungodly hot that day, probably around 100 degrees with that dry Nevada heat that makes the air shimmer. I knocked on the cab door. No answer. I walked around the truck, peering through windows, and that's when I noticed the driver's door was locked, but the windows were cracked about an inch. Strange, since most truckers would never sleep with windows open, especially in a sketchy rest area. I called out, "Nevada Highway Patrol? Anyone in there?" Nothing. After running the plates, I confirmed it was Marcus Wheeler's truck. Dispatch gave me permission to check inside for signs of the driver. I had to get a Slim Jim from my cruiser to pop the lock. The interior of the cab felt wrong immediately. It was neat, organized, but completely empty of its driver. His wallet sat on the dash, phone on the passenger seat, logbook filled out until 2:17 a.m. There was even a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in paper on a little fold-down table. But no Wheeler and no truck keys. The hair on my arms stood up. In all my years on the highway, I'd never seen a trucker abandon his rig like this, especially leaving behind his wallet and phone. These guys live in their trucks. They're basically homes on wheels. No trucker just walks away. I radioed it in as a possible missing person and began questioning the few other people at the rest area. That's when things got weirder. An older lady with a little terrier was pretty shaken up. Loretta Jenkins, I think her name was, said her dog went absolutely ballistic around 3 a.m., barking and growling at something outside her RV window. She was too scared to look out, just held onto her dog until it finally calmed down. Then there was this Hispanic trucker, Hector Ramirez, who told me he'd seen a flashlight beam moving around Wheeler's truck around that same time. Said he assumed it was the driver doing a check or something, but then heard what he described as metal grinding against metal, like someone was using an angle grinder. He thought it was strange, but figured the guy was doing emergency repairs. The last guy I talked to really got to me, Martin Frazier, an older trucker with at least 20 years on the road. When I mentioned Wheeler was missing, his face went pale. "This rest area," he said, shaking his head, "it's got a bad reputation. Real bad. A lot of drivers won't stop here anymore, especially after dark." When I pressed him for details, he just said truckers reported all kinds of weird shit happening here. Electronics going haywire, strange sounds in the night, feeling like they were being watched. He personally avoided the place, was only there because he'd had a mechanical issue and couldn't make it to the next stop. I called in the state police investigators. They went through Wheeler's truck with a fine-tooth comb. That's when they found the weird clear goo on the driver's seat, some kind of viscous fluid that the lab later couldn't identify. Not human, not animal, not any kind of automotive fluid they'd ever seen. They also found unidentified fingerprints on the passenger door handle. Not Wheeler's, not in any database. But the thing that really screwed with my head was the voice recording they found on his phone. It was made at 2:58 a.m., about 40 minutes after he'd logged stopping for his break. In it, Wheeler is whispering, sounds terrified. "There's something out there watching the trucks. I can see it moving between the rigs. Not animal, not human either. Jesus Christ, it's..." Then the recording just cuts off with this bizarre electronic sound, like interference, but with a distinct pattern to it. The techs couldn't explain it, said it wasn't any normal kind of interference they'd ever heard. Wheeler's wife came down from Oklahoma the next day. Poor woman was beside herself. She told us Marcus had been complaining about weird electrical issues with his truck for weeks. Lights flickering on and off, radio changing stations by itself. He'd had the truck checked out twice, but mechanics couldn't find anything wrong with the electrical system. She also said he'd mentioned feeling like he was being followed on his night drives, but could never see anything when he pulled over to check. 6 days into the investigation, a highway maintenance guy found Wheeler's trucker cap sitting on top of a Joshua tree about 100 yards from the rest area. The tree was at least 12 feet tall, and the cap was balanced perfectly on the very top, like someone had carefully placed it there. But how and why? I volunteered to help with the search parties. We combed miles of desert around that rest area. Nothing, no blood, no clothing, no signs of struggle. It was like Wheeler had just evaporated into thin air. The case started consuming me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept thinking about that recording, the terror in Wheeler's voice. Whatever he saw out there in the dark wasn't something he could explain. After a month with no new leads, the department scaled back the investigation, but I couldn't let it go. I started spending my off-duty time at that rest area. At first, I'd just sit in my personal vehicle for a few hours watching. Then I started staying overnight, parking in different spots, observing. For the first few nights, nothing happened. Just the occasional trucker pulling in for a break, the wind moving through the Joshua trees, distant coyotes howling. But on my fifth night there, around 2:30 a.m., my car's electrical system went haywire, headlights flashing on and off, radio scanning through stations even though the car was off, cell phone completely dead despite being fully charged. I sat there, heart pounding, wondering if this was what Wheeler had experienced. Then it stopped. Complete silence. That's when I noticed there were no sounds at all. No wind, no distant traffic on the highway, no insects, nothing. Just absolute stillness. I remember looking in my rearview mirror and seeing something moving between the parked trucks. It was dark, but there was a shape there that didn't make sense to my brain. It seemed to shift and change as it moved, like it couldn't decide what form to take. Not human, not animal, something else entirely. I wanted to start my car and get the hell out of there, but I was paralyzed. Couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then my car door handle jiggled just a little, like someone, or something, was testing it to see if it was unlocked. I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember was the sun coming up and me still sitting in my car, doors locked, windows up. Everything seemed normal again, birds chirping, trucks moving on the distant highway, but there was a clear, viscous fluid on my driver's side window, on the outside, exactly like what they'd found on Wheeler's seat. I scraped some of it into an evidence bag and took it to the lab myself. They ran the same tests as before and got the same non-results. Unknown biological substance was all they could tell me. I kept going back to that rest area, night after night. Sometimes nothing would happen. Other times my electronics would go crazy. Twice more I saw that shape moving in the darkness. Once I heard the metal grinding sound that Ramirez had described. After about 20 nights of this, I saw it clearly. It was around 3:15 a.m. during a new moon, so it was incredibly dark. But there was something standing in the open area between the trucks and the restroom building. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and its outline seemed to waver and shift, like heat rising off asphalt. It didn't walk so much as glide, and it moved with this terrible purpose toward one of the parked trucks. I watched as it approached the truck, then seemed to, I don't know how to describe it, sort of phase through the metal of the cab itself. The truck's lights flickered wildly for about 30 seconds, then went dark. A few minutes later, the thing emerged from the truck and turned, I swear to God, directly toward me. Even though it had no discernible face, I knew it was looking right at me, knew it could see me, and somehow I knew it was the same thing that had taken Marcus Wheeler. I resigned the next day. Couldn't bring myself to even go back to that rest area to collect the small camera I'd hidden there on my last visit. Wrote a cryptic resignation letter that probably convinced my superiors I'd had some kind of breakdown. Maybe I had. All I know is I've been looking over my shoulder ever since. Sometimes my house lights flicker for no reason. Sometimes my TV changes channels by itself. Sometimes I wake up at exactly 3 a.m., heart racing, feeling like something is watching me from the corner of my bedroom. They closed that rest area permanently in January 2020. Officially, it was due to maintenance issues and budget cuts. But I know the real reason. Too many reports of strange occurrences. Too many truckers refusing to stop there, creating their own detours that added hours to their journeys. I don't know what happened to Marcus Wheeler. I don't know what lives in that stretch of desert off Highway 95. All I know is that it's still out there, and sometimes, when I'm driving at night and my lights flicker, I can feel it nearby, watching, waiting. And I know that whatever it is, it knows that I've seen it. And I can't shake the feeling that one day, I'll end up wherever Marcus Wheeler is now. Story 6. I still feel my heart racing whenever I think about what happened in Blackwater Creek. It's been 12 years, but some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear footsteps matching my own from somewhere in the darkness. Let me start from the beginning. Back in the summer of 2011, I was wrapping up my master's degree in environmental science at UW-Madison. My friends and I had been planning this backcountry hiking trip for months. a 52-mile trek through the Blackwater Creek Wilderness area in northern Minnesota. There were 6 of us: me, Michael, my research partner Sophia, our friends Aaron and Rebecca, and James and Catherine, who'd gotten married the previous fall. We were all experienced hikers. This wasn't some random group of city kids wandering into the woods. Aaron had been an Eagle Scout, Catherine had worked as a wilderness guide during undergrad, and I'd done survival training courses. We had the right gear, detailed maps, and emergency protocols. We weren't being reckless. The first 2 days were exactly what we'd hoped for. Challenging terrain, but absolutely gorgeous. The kind of pristine wilderness that makes you feel small in the best possible way. We saw a moose and her calf on the morning of day 2, and that night we sat around the campfire, talking about our research and future plans. It felt perfect. Everything changed on the 3rd day. I was taking point that morning, leading us along a narrow trail that followed a ridgeline. About mid-morning, I noticed something odd: fresh boot prints in the soft dirt. They weren't ours. We'd been following game trails and occasionally using our own route-finding skills, not sticking to established paths. But these prints were clearly heading in the same direction we were. At first, I didn't think much of it. Other hikers use these trails, right? But something about the pattern bothered me. The stride length was long and purposeful. Not someone meandering to enjoy nature, but someone moving with intention. I mentioned it to the others during our lunch break. James thought I was overthinking it, but Catherine admitted she'd been hearing something strange for the past hour or so, a rhythmic sound that seemed to match our pace, but coming from somewhere in the dense forest to our left. When she'd stop, it would stop. When we resumed hiking, the sound would continue. Like someone's keeping pace with us just out of sight, she said, and I remember how her voice wavered slightly. We decided to pick up our pace and be more vigilant. By late afternoon, we'd reached our planned camping area near a small lake. As we set up camp, Rebecca walked to a clearing about 50 yards away to get better reception on our satellite phone. She came running back, her face pale. "Guys, you need to see this." We followed her to a small clearing where someone had built a cairn, a stack of flat stones about 3 feet high. On top of the cairn were 6 bandanas, our bandanas, arranged in a circle: red, blue, green, black, orange, and purple. Each of us had packed one in our gear that morning. Aaron immediately checked his pack. His bandana was gone. So were all of ours. Someone had gone through our packs while we were hiking, taken our bandanas, and then raced ahead to leave this message. There's no other word for it. It was deliberate, a way of saying, "I can get to your things whenever I want." Rebecca tried calling the ranger station, but we were in a dead zone. We finally got through using the satellite phone, but the ranger who answered said the nearest help was at least a day and a half away, given our location. He advised us to hike out toward the main trail if we were concerned. That night, no one wanted to sleep. We set up watches in pairs. No one would be alone, even for bathroom breaks. We kept the fire going and our headlamps ready. During the midnight to 2 a.m. shift, Sophia nudged me awake. "Michael," she whispered, "look over there." About 200 yards away, through the trees, a flashlight beam was moving. Slow, methodical sweeps back and forth. Whoever was holding it was taking their time, searching for something or someone. Aaron had a handgun with him. Legally permitted, he'd brought it for bear protection. He fired a warning shot into the air. The light immediately went out. We didn't sleep at all that night. At first light, we packed up quickly and headed toward the main trail, hoping to intercept a ranger patrol or at least reach cell service. We'd been hiking for about 2 hours when we came to a section of trail blocked by fallen trees. Not one tree, which might have been natural, but 3 large pines laid across our path. The cuts were fresh, the sap still sticky and fragrant. "This was done with a chainsaw," James said, examining the clean cuts. "Within the last few hours, we had to detour around them, pushing through dense underbrush. It slowed us down considerably." After another hour of difficult hiking, we found our new path blocked by a small ravine that wasn't on our maps. Looking back now, it's obvious we were being herded away from the main trail, deeper into the wilderness. By late afternoon, we were completely off our planned route. We found a defensive position to make camp, a small clearing with a rock face at our backs so no one could approach from behind. As we were setting up, Catherine found something partially buried near a fallen log, a two-way radio. It was an expensive model, the kind search and rescue teams use. When she turned it on, it was set to channel 6. There were 6 of us. I still get goosebumps thinking about that detail. We tried using it to contact help, but got only static. We decided to keep it on, hoping to overhear something useful. That night was the worst. Around midnight, we heard a soft thud near the edge of our camp. Aaron and I went to investigate with our headlamps. Sitting on a log just within the perimeter of light from our fire was a stack of photographs. Not digital photos on a phone or camera, actual printed pictures on weatherproof paper. They were photos of us, photos taken during our trip. There was one of Rebecca filtering water at a stream we'd stopped at on day 1. Another showed James and Catherine setting up their tent the previous night. There was one of Aaron looking at his map during a break we'd taken that afternoon. The most disturbing was a series of photos of us sleeping in our tents 2 nights before. The shots were taken from just outside the tent mesh, meaning whoever took them had been standing there, watching us sleep from just a few feet away. "We need to get out of here now," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "Not in the morning, right now." No one disagreed. We packed up in record time, leaving the campfire burning as a decoy. Using our compass and the stars, we started moving northeast, where we believed the main park road was located. We hiked through the night, stumbling over roots and rocks, pushing through branches that scratched our faces in the darkness. At dawn, we came across something that made my blood run cold. A large oak tree stood in a small clearing. Hanging from its branches were 6 sets of climbing harnesses and helmets. They were identical to the equipment we had shipped ahead to Duluth for the rock climbing portion of our trip planned for the following week. This wasn't random. Whoever was stalking us knew who we were, knew our plans, and had been preparing for our arrival. "We need to split up," Aaron suggested. "Whoever this is can't follow all of us." It was risky, but we agreed it was our best chance. We divided into 3 pairs and headed in different directions. Sophia and I went east, James and Catherine went north, and Aaron and Rebecca headed southeast. We agreed to meet at the ranger station if possible, or back in Madison if not. Sophia and I pushed through dense forest for hours. Around midday, we finally got cell reception. I'll never forget the relief when the emergency dispatcher answered and said help was on the way. They triangulated our location and told us to stay put. A rescue helicopter found us about 3 hours later. James and Catherine had also made it out. They'd encountered a logging crew on a service road who drove them to the nearest ranger station. Aaron and Rebecca had the most terrifying experience. They'd discovered a hunting blind, carefully concealed in the trees. Inside was surveillance equipment, high-powered spotting scopes, night vision goggles, and a laptop containing hundreds of images of not just our group, but other hikers who had passed through the region in previous months. The authorities eventually caught the guy. His name was Carlton Mercer, a former backcountry guide who'd been fired from the Park Service 3 years earlier. They found his cabin about 15 miles from where we'd been hiking. It was filled with items stolen from hikers, watches, knives, clothing. He had detailed journals describing his techniques for stalking groups and plans for capturing people. The investigators told us he'd been doing this for years, stalking over 20 different hiking groups, gradually getting bolder. We were apparently going to be his first collection, as he called it in his journal. He got 27 years in federal prison. I testified at his trial. He just sat there staring at me with this slight smile the whole time, like we shared some private joke. "I don't go hiking anymore. I can't. Every time I hear a twig snap or leaves rustle, I'm right back there in Blackwater Creek, knowing someone is watching me from just beyond the trees. The worst part? Sometimes I still get anonymous envelopes in the mail, no return address. Inside is always the same thing, a single photograph from that trip that wasn't in the evidence file. They're new angles, moments I don't remember being photographed. The police say it's impossible. Mercer is still in prison. All his accomplices were rounded up. But last month, I received another one. It wasn't from the trip. It was a photo of my current apartment building, taken from across the street. I'm moving next week. I haven't told anyone where I'm going. Story 7. I still don't know how to explain what happened to me last October. It's been months, but I check over my shoulder every night walking home from work. I've moved apartments, changed my routine, even considered leaving Riverside altogether, but the feeling of being watched never goes away. I'm a bartender at the Copper Tap downtown. It's nothing fancy, just your typical dive bar with regular customers and decent tips. My shift usually ends around 2 in the morning, and I'd gotten comfortable with my late-night walks home. The downtown area is pretty dead by then, and I actually used to enjoy the quiet after dealing with noise and people all night. That Thursday night started like any other. I locked up the bar, nodded goodbye to the cook who was heading the opposite direction, and started my usual 15-minute walk home. It was chilly, that perfect October weather when you need a light jacket but nothing heavy. The streets were empty except for a couple of drunk college kids stumbling toward their dorms and the occasional car. I remember everything about that night so clearly. I was exhausted from a double shift and thinking about whether I should do laundry when I got home or just crash. The streetlights made those weird yellow pools on the sidewalk, and I could hear faint music from the Vault, this club about 3 blocks away. I took my usual shortcut down Cedar Street. It saves me about 5 minutes, when I spotted something on the sidewalk ahead. At first, I thought it was just trash, but as I got closer, I realized it was a mask. A cheap plastic clown mask, the kind you'd find at a dollar store before Halloween. White face, red nose, that exaggerated smile with bright red lips. The weird thing was how it was positioned, perfectly centered under a streetlight, face up like someone had carefully placed it there, not tossed or dropped accidentally. The empty eye holes were just staring up at the light. I'm not normally jumpy about stuff like that. I've seen plenty of weird things working late nights in a college town, but something about that mask made my skin crawl. The way it was positioned seemed deliberate, like it was waiting for someone. I walked around it, keeping my distance. For a second, I considered kicking it into the gutter, but I didn't want to touch it, even with my shoe. By the time I got home to my second-floor apartment, I'd mostly forgotten about it. I took a shower, watched some mindless YouTube videos, and fell asleep. The next night was Friday, so the bar was packed. I was running non-stop until closing, and by the time I locked up, my feet were killing me. All I wanted was to get home and collapse into bed. I took the same route, not even thinking about the mask from the night before. As I rounded the corner onto my street, I stopped dead in my tracks. Across from my apartment building, under the streetlight, was someone wearing that same damn clown mask. They weren't moving, just standing there, perfectly still, facing my building. At first, I thought they must be looking at someone else's window. It's an apartment building after all. But then I realized my living room light was still on. I always leave it on when I'm working late, and they were staring directly at my window. My heart started pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just some drunk college kids playing pranks. Halloween was coming up and people do stupid shit around then. Maybe someone filming one of those idiotic social media challenges. But the complete stillness was unnerving. Most pranksters move around, laugh, do something to draw attention. This person was just standing there. I quickened my pace and kept my head down as I approached my building. I fumbled with my keys at the door, dropping them once before managing to get inside. Once in my apartment, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and peeked through the blinds. They were still there, in the exact same position. I watched for maybe 10 minutes, and they didn't move at all. Then, without any warning, they simply turned and walked away, disappearing down the street. I barely slept that night. I kept getting up to check the window, but whoever it was didn't come back. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, just someone messing around before Halloween. Saturday night at the bar was even busier than Friday. I was so swamped I didn't have time to think about the masked figure. By the time I started walking home, a little after 2:30 in the morning, I was dead on my feet. I'd almost managed to forget about the previous night, until I saw them again. Same spot, same mask. But this time, they were holding something, a small notebook, just standing there, completely motionless, staring at my window. My stomach dropped. Once could be random, twice wasn't a coincidence. I pretended not to notice as I approached my building, keeping my eyes on my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. Once inside, I locked it twice and ran up to my apartment, locking that door behind me too. I went straight to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. They had moved. Now they were directly under the streetlight in front of my building, still looking up. The mask looked even more disturbing from above, those empty black eye holes seeming to stare right through the curtain to where I was standing. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? There's someone in a clown mask standing on a public sidewalk. They weren't doing anything illegal. I thought about confronting them, but something told me that would be a terrible idea. For an hour, I watched through a gap in the curtains. They barely moved, just stood there, occasionally writing something in the notebook. Finally, around 4 in the morning, they walked away. Sunday was my day off, and I spent most of it looking out my window, checking to see if they would come back during daylight. They didn't. I tried to convince myself it would stop, that whoever it was would get bored and move on to some other sick game. Monday night proved me wrong. I got off work early, around midnight, thinking maybe I could avoid them by changing my schedule. I even took a different route home, walking the long way around several blocks. As I turned onto my street, my heart sank. They were already there waiting, standing in their usual spot. When they saw me, they tilted their heads slightly to the side, like they were acknowledging my attempt to avoid them. This time they were carrying a small black bag. That subtle head tilt was what broke me. It was the first real movement I'd seen them make, and it felt like they were mocking me. They knew I was trying to escape them, and they were letting me know it wouldn't work. I hurried inside, locked everything, and sat in the dark. I couldn't stop shaking. This wasn't a random prank anymore. This person was specifically targeting me. But why? I couldn't think of anyone who would have a reason to scare me like this. I'm not involved in anything illegal. I don't have enemies. I'm just a regular bartender trying to pay my bills. I watched them from my window until around 2 in the morning when they finally left. I couldn't sleep after that. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. I kept imagining them somehow getting into the building, finding my apartment. Around 3:15 in the morning, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway outside my door. My building is old, with thin walls, so I can usually hear when neighbors come and go. But these footsteps were different, slow and deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. I crept to my door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just been there. I was about to turn away when I heard it. 3 slow, soft knocks on my door. My blood turned to ice. I backed away from the door, tripping over my coffee table and nearly falling. The knocking came again, slightly louder this time. With shaking hands, I called 911, whispering that someone was at my door, that I thought it was the person who had been following me. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and that officers would be there soon. The knocking stopped. I waited in terrified silence, phone clutched to my ear, staring at the door and praying the locks would hold. When the police finally arrived about 15 minutes later, there was no one in the hallway. But there was something left at my door, the black bag I'd seen them carrying earlier. The officers opened it carefully. Inside was the clown mask. Just the mask, nothing else. No note, no explanation. The police took a report, but there wasn't much they could do. They advised me to stay with a friend for a few days and said they'd have patrol cars check the area more frequently. They took the mask as evidence, but I don't think anything ever came of it. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I crashed on a coworker's couch and called my landlord the next morning to give my notice. Within a week, I'd moved to a different part of town, one that required a car to get to. No more walking home. I still work at the Copper Tap, but I drive now, even though parking is a nightmare downtown. My old landlord told me they installed security cameras after I left, but I never asked if they caught anything. Part of me doesn't want to know. It's been months since I've seen that mask or the person wearing it. But sometimes, when I'm getting into my car late at night, I catch myself scanning the parking lot, looking for a motionless figure watching me from the shadows. And when I get home, I always check every room, every closet before I can relax. I don't know who they were or what they wanted. I don't know why they chose me, but they succeeded in one thing, making me feel perpetually watched. That feeling never really goes away. Story 8. I still remember the day I got my first computer like it was yesterday. It was the summer of 2003, and I was 13, that awkward age where you're not a kid anymore, but definitely not grown up either. My mom had saved up for months to buy it for me. "It's for school," she said, setting up the bulky beige desktop in the corner of my bedroom. But we both knew it was more than that. It was her way of making up for all the hours she wasn't home, working double shifts at the diner to keep us afloat after Dad left. I was always the quiet kid, the one who carried extra weight and got overlooked. At school, I practically blended into the walls. No one really bullied me. That would have required them to notice me first. But online, I could be anyone. The first few weeks, I just played games and did homework like Mom expected. But then I discovered chat rooms, places where no one could see the real me. The overweight girl with frizzy hair and braces who wore the same 3 oversized hoodies on rotation. Online, I was whoever I wanted to be. It started innocently enough. I'd log on after school while Mom was at work. Our kitchen had this one dim light that cast everything in this yellowish glow. I'd make myself a bowl of cereal for dinner and sit there for hours, talking to strangers who thought I was cool, funny, interesting. I told everyone I was 15. It seemed like a good age, old enough to be taken seriously, but not so old that I couldn't fake it. 2 years didn't seem like such a big lie. It was a Tuesday night when I first got a private message from Rob. Mom was working late again, and I was in this chat room for music fans. He messaged me saying he liked my profile picture, which wasn't even me. It was some random girl's photo I found online. "You have great taste in music. Not many girls your age appreciate good rock bands," he wrote. I remember feeling this rush when he singled me out. Someone actually wanted to talk to me specifically. He said he was 19 and in college. He had this way of making me feel special, like I was mature for my age, like I understood things other kids didn't. We started talking every night, first in the chat room, then through email, and eventually he asked for my phone number. I gave it to him without hesitation. Looking back, I can't believe how easily I handed over that information, but at the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The first time we talked on the phone, I locked myself in the bathroom so Mom wouldn't hear. His voice was deeper than I expected. He laughed at all my jokes and told me I was smart and interesting. No one had ever made me feel that way before. For weeks, we talked almost every day. I'd rush home from school to check if he'd emailed me. I started skipping meals just to chat with him longer. He became the center of my world. Then one day, I found out he was talking to another girl. He'd accidentally sent me an email meant for her. I was devastated. I tried to end things, told him I didn't want to talk anymore. But he called me that night, apologizing over and over. He said she was just a friend, that I was the one he really cared about. "I've never connected with anyone the way I connect with you," he told me. "You understand me in a way no one else does." I believed him. God, I believed every word. A few days later, he suggested we meet in person. My stomach dropped when he said it, but not from fear, from excitement. He said he'd drive to see me that weekend while Mom was working her Saturday double shift. I gave him my address without thinking twice. That Saturday, I spent hours getting ready. I put on makeup I'd stolen from Mom's dresser and the only nice clothes I had, jeans that were still a bit too tight, and a top I thought made me look older. I waited by the window, watching for his car. He'd said he drove a blue Honda, but when he finally showed up, he parked about 4 kilometers away and walked through the back alley. I didn't think anything of it at the time. He texted me, "I'm almost there, can't wait to see you." My friend Jessie had come over earlier to help me get ready, but when Rob finally arrived at the door, something weird happened. Jessie took one look at him and her face just changed. She mumbled something about needing to go home and practically ran out the back door. I should have listened to her reaction. I should have paid attention to that warning, but I didn't. Rob didn't look 19. He was taller than I expected, with thinning hair and the beginnings of wrinkles around his eyes. But he smiled at me the same way he'd described in our chats, that half smile he said he saved just for me. And he brought me a necklace, this cheap silver thing with a heart pendant. I put it on immediately. "You're even prettier in person," he said, and my heart practically exploded. Within minutes of him entering my house, things changed. His voice got lower, more serious. He asked to see my bedroom. I led him upstairs, proud of the posters I'd put up of bands he'd introduced me to. I thought he wanted to see my computer, maybe look at some music sites together. I don't want to go into detail about what happened next. Even now, typing this makes my hands shake. But he didn't just want to see my computer. He pushed me onto my bed, the same bed with the pink comforter I'd had since I was 9. And he hurt me. He took something from me I didn't even fully understand yet. Afterward, he acted like nothing had happened, like we'd just had a normal visit. He looked at my computer, commented on my desktop wallpaper, and then said he had to go. But before he left, he told me to meet him after school on Monday. Not a question, an instruction. "Don't tell anyone about today," he said. "They wouldn't understand how special what we have is." I nodded, still in shock. Monday came and I got on the school bus like normal. But when we reached the drop-off point, I didn't go into the school. Rob was waiting in his car, a blue Honda, just like he'd said. I got in without hesitation. I thought we were going on a date, to a movie maybe, or for ice cream. Instead, he just drove around looking for places where no one would see us. He took me to an abandoned parking lot behind an old factory, then later to a wooded area off the highway. In the car, I noticed things I hadn't seen before, like a photo tucked into his sun visor, a young girl, maybe my age or a bit younger. When I asked who she was, he said it was his cousin. I believed him. I noticed his hair was thinner on top than I expected. "You're losing your hair," I said, not trying to be mean, just observing. "It's stress," he replied shortly. "My job is demanding." I asked what job he had. He changed the subject. At one point, I asked to see his driver's license. Curious about his real name, I'd only ever known him as Rob. He said he'd forgotten it at his hotel, another red flag I ignored. After that day, he dropped me off a few blocks from school so I could pretend I'd been there all along. I walked home like normal, carrying this massive secret. A few days passed. I was quieter than usual, picking at my food, spending more time alone in my room. Mom noticed something was off. She checked the computer history, something I didn't know how to clear back then. She found the chat logs, the emails. She saw I'd been skipping school. She confronted me that night, screaming and crying. She grounded me, took away the computer, called the school. I was angry, so angry. I thought she was ruining the only good thing in my life. I told her she was jealous because no one loved her the way Rob loved me. I found a way to contact Rob from a friend's phone. I told him everything, said I wanted to live with him instead. He agreed to come get me. 2 nights later, I packed a small bag and snuck out my bedroom window while Mom was asleep. Rob was waiting at the end of our street. This time there was someone else in the car, a man I'd never seen before. Rob said it was his cousin who was helping with the drive. The same cousin from the photo, supposedly, though this was clearly a grown man in his 30s. We drove for what felt like forever. 8 hours, maybe more. I fell asleep for parts of it. The worst parts happened in the back seat while the other man drove. I kept telling myself this was what love looked like, that the discomfort and pain were normal, that once we got to his house, everything would be perfect. We stopped at a gas station around dawn. While Rob was paying for gas, I tried to use the payphone to call Mom. I don't know why. Some part of me must have known this was all wrong. But the phone was out of service. When we finally reached his town, he parked about a block away from where he said his house was. He and the other man went inside first to get things ready. I was so exhausted that I fell asleep in the car, curled up in the back seat. I woke up to shouting and bright lights. There were cars surrounding us, men in dark jackets with FBI written on them. One of them opened the car door, asked if I was Lily Thompson. I nodded, confused and terrified. They took me to a police station first, then a hospital. I learned later that Mom had given the police Rob's license plate, which she'd written down when she saw him dropping me off that day after school. They'd been tracking his car, waiting for the right moment to intervene. I flew home the next day. Mom was waiting at the airport, her eyes red from crying. She hugged me so tight I could hardly breathe. It's been years now. I've been through therapy, moved to a new town, started over. But some days, I still feel like that 13-year-old girl sitting at her computer in a dimly lit kitchen, desperate to be seen, to be special to someone. The scariest part, some of the details are still foggy. There are whole chunks of those days I can't remember clearly. My therapist says that's my brain protecting me, but sometimes I wonder what else happened that I've blocked out. Sometimes I still dream about being in that car, watching the highway lines blur together, feeling like I was disappearing with each mile, and I wake up checking the locks on my doors and windows, making sure I'm really safe, that he can't find me again. I don't know why I'm sharing this now. Maybe because I saw a news story about another girl, younger than I was, who went through something similar. Maybe because I want other kids to recognize the warning signs I missed. Or maybe I just need to get it out of my system, put it somewhere outside of my head. All I know is that computer, that stupid beige desktop that was supposed to help with school, changed everything. And sometimes I wonder who I would have become if we'd never bought it. Story 9. I'm only writing this down because I can't sleep anymore. I need to tell someone what happened, even if no one believes me. I've been with Houston PD for 8 years now, crime scene investigation unit. I'm not the type who sees ghosts or believes in conspiracy theories. I deal with evidence, facts, blood spatter patterns, and fingerprints. But what I witnessed last summer destroyed everything I thought I knew about reality. It started July 11th, 2022. I remember the date perfectly because it was my daughter's birthday, and I had promised to leave work early for her party. I was finishing up some paperwork when my supervisor called me down to the morgue. Officer Daniel Ramirez had been killed during a traffic stop gone wrong the night before. Single gunshot to the chest. The shooter was in custody, open and shut case. I knew Danny. Not well, but we'd grab coffee sometimes when our shifts overlapped. Good guy with 2 kids. His wife was 8 months pregnant with their third. When I got to the morgue, Dr. Patel, our chief medical examiner, was waiting for me. She looked pale, shaken. "I need you to document this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I need you to keep your mouth shut about what you see." The morgue was unusually cold that day. I remember my breath fogging as I followed her to drawer number 7. She pulled it open, and I expected to see Danny's body. The drawer was empty except for this weird crystalline dust. It looked like frost, but it was a humid July in Houston. Dr. Patel handed me an evidence bag containing some of the substance. "The power flickered for maybe 10 seconds at 3:17 this morning," she explained. "When I came in to start the autopsy at 7, this is all that was left." I stared at her. "That's impossible. Bodies don't just disappear." She showed me the security footage. Danny's body clearly visible at 3:16 a.m. Screen goes black for exactly 12 seconds. When the cameras come back online at 3:17, the drawer is open and the body is gone. No one entered or left the room. I examined every inch of that morgue, the ventilation system, the drains, everything. There was no way someone could have removed a 200-pound body in 12 seconds without leaving a trace. That dust was the only evidence we had. I rushed it to our lab, and the results made no sense. The molecular structure didn't match anything in our database. It wasn't human tissue, wasn't any known substance. The closest match was some kind of silicon-based crystalline compound, but even that was off by several markers. My supervisor told me to keep it quiet, said it would cause a panic if word got out. I agreed, thinking it was some bizarre lab error or elaborate prank. 2 days later, Detective Angela Morrison was found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide. She'd been working with Danny on something called Project Lazarus. I didn't know what that was at the time. Her body was brought in under heavy security. Guards posted at the morgue entrance. Camera systems upgraded and doubled. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, the power flickered again, just for a few seconds. When it came back on, Angela's body was gone. Same crystalline residue left behind. By now, the brass was freaking out. Internal Affairs showed up, Homeland Security, people in suits with no identification. They took over the investigation and pushed us out, but I had copied the case files before they arrived. That night, I started digging through Danny and Angela's cases. They'd both been working on a series of unusual missing persons. People who had been pronounced clinically dead at hospitals, but disappeared before death certificates could be filed. 12 cases over the past 6 months, and the kicker, all reported power fluctuations at the time of disappearance. I couldn't sleep, kept seeing that empty drawer in my mind, the crystalline dust that shouldn't exist. 3 days after Angela disappeared, Officer Thomas Liu was killed during a raid. Thomas had been processing evidence from both Danny and Angela's cases. His body was taken directly to a secure facility at Homeland Security. They had generators, backup systems, armed guards. At 3:17 a.m., the power still flickered, and Thomas vanished too. That's when things got even weirder. Officers started reporting seeing Danny Ramirez on patrol, in his uniform, driving his usual route. When they approached him or shined a light directly at him, he would just vanish. One officer tried to take a photo, but the image showed only an empty street. I was working late one night, going through security footage from the precinct, when I noticed something odd. The system showed Danny logging into his computer 2 days after his death, Angela accessing case files, Thomas pulling up evidence records. I brought in Kyle from IT. He's this computer genius who should be working for some tech company making millions, but stays with us because his dad was a cop. Kyle found hidden code embedded in our personnel database. When an officer was marked as deceased, this code activated, creating what he called a digital consciousness that continued to access department resources. It's like their digital footprint is still walking around, Kyle said. But this isn't just some automated program. It's making decisions, following investigation patterns. It's thinking. I asked Kyle to keep monitoring the system. The next day, he sent me a text with an address. It was an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of town. The GPS coordinates had been accessed repeatedly by all 3 missing officers' accounts. I should have reported it, should have gone through proper channels. But by then, I didn't trust anyone, so I went alone after my shift ended. The facility looked like it had been empty for years. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, but the security keypad by the back entrance was new, clean. I tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside was dark except for the glow of computer monitors in what must have been the main lab. The air smelled like ozone and something else I couldn't identify, something metallic but not like blood. The monitors showed lines of code I couldn't understand. One screen displayed what looked like a human body, but translucent, with glowing points throughout. Another showed a map of Houston with 12 red dots pulsing in different locations. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around, hand on my weapon. Nobody there, but the footsteps continued, moving around me in a circle. I shined my flashlight in every direction, saw nothing. Then my phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. "Why are you here, Detective Carson?" That's my name. No one knew I was there. Another text. "Project Lazarus is not what you think. We're still police officers. We still serve. The footsteps got closer. I backed up against a wall, drew my weapon. "Who's there?" I called out. The air in front of me shimmered, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. And then Danny Ramirez was standing there, except he wasn't quite solid. Light passed through him, and his skin had this translucent quality. When he moved, I could see a faint trail behind him, like multiple exposures in a photograph. "You shouldn't be here, Carson," he said. His voice sounded normal, but had this weird echo, like he was speaking through water. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. "We're not dead," he continued, "just upgraded." As he said this, Angela and Thomas appeared beside him, the same translucent quality to their bodies. Their eyes reflected light like cat's eyes. "What happened to you?" I finally managed to ask. "Project Lazarus," Angela said. "It started as research into near-death experiences, people who were revived after being clinically dead. But they discovered something else, a way to transfer consciousness, to evolve. We volunteered," Thomas added. "They needed officers, people who could handle the transition." Danny stepped closer. I could see through his chest to the wall behind him. "The human body is inefficient. This is better. We don't sleep, don't eat, can move between digital and physical space." I backed away. "This is insane. You're dead. I saw your body." "The body is just transport," Danny said. "We left those behind." Something on one of the monitors beeped. All three of them turned to look simultaneously, moving with unnatural synchronization. "They're coming," Angela said. "You need to leave." "Who's coming?" I asked. "The others," Thomas said. "The ones who didn't volunteer. The ones who don't remember being human." Danny grabbed my arm. His hand felt cold, like touching dry ice. "September 14th, 3:17 a.m., Memorial Hermann Hospital. If you want answers, be there." Then all three of them just dissolved, turned into that same crystalline dust that had been left in the morgue, hanging in the air for a moment before dispersing. I ran, got in my car and drove straight home. Told my wife we needed to visit her mother for a few weeks. Anywhere but Houston. She could tell something was wrong, but I couldn't explain. How do you tell someone you saw your dead colleagues who weren't quite dead anymore? But I couldn't stay away. September 14th came, and I found myself parked outside Memorial Hermann Hospital at 3 in the morning. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but at exactly 3:17, the hospital lights flickered. When they came back on, I saw them. Not just Danny, Angela, and Thomas, but all 12 missing persons from their cases, walking out the front doors, their skin translucent, catching the streetlights like prisms. They moved in perfect unison toward the parking lot, where a black van was waiting. As they passed my car, Danny stopped and looked directly at me. He placed his hand on my window, leaving a pattern of crystalline frost that formed into words. "They know you know." The next morning, their bodies reappeared. All 15 of them, including the 3 officers. They were found in the morgue, showing no decomposition but containing what the initial reports called artificial organs made of the same crystalline substance. Their blood was silvery, their skin semi-translucent. Under UV light, they seemed to phase in and out of visibility. Homeland Security classified everything immediately. The bodies were transported to an unknown location. Everyone involved was forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. But someone leaked documents showing the government had been researching post-mortem consciousness retention for years. I was removed from the investigation, transferred to administrative duty, my access to the case files revoked. But sometimes, late at night, my computer turns on by itself. Files open and close, and occasionally I get text messages from numbers that don't exist, containing GPS coordinates of places I'm afraid to visit. Last week I saw Danny again, standing outside my daughter's school, just watching. When I approached him, he didn't disappear. He smiled and said, "Soon, Carson, soon you'll understand. I don't know what they are. I don't know what Project Lazarus really is, but I know they're still out there." still accessing our systems, still watching. And sometimes, when the lights flicker, I swear I can feel that crystalline dust settling on my skin. Story 10. I keep replaying that night in my head over and over. August 7th, 2021. It's been over 2 years, but the memories are so vivid they might as well have happened yesterday. I've been driving trucks for nearly 20 years, seen all kinds of weird shit on the road, but nothing, absolutely nothing, comes close to what happened that night on my route from Santa Fe to Vegas. I'm writing this down because I need someone to believe me. The police think I'm crazy. The company thinks I was on drugs. My ex-wife thinks I had some kind of mental breakdown. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. It started about 3 weeks before that night. I was on the same route, passing through the Black Mountains in Arizona, when I spotted something strange in the valley below. It was dark out, around 11 at night, and at first I thought it was just lights from a small town or maybe some kind of mining operation. But the more I looked at it, the less sense it made. It looked like a massive structure, geometrically perfect, with edges that seemed to glow from within. Almost crystalline. The weird thing was, I'd driven this route dozens of times, and there's absolutely nothing out there, just empty desert for miles. I mentioned it to a couple other drivers at a truck stop the next morning, and one of them, Marcus, I think his name was, said he'd seen something similar. Like a glowing building where there shouldn't be one, he said. Bluish light. Makes you feel weird just looking at it. The second time I saw it was about a week later. Same route, same area, but this time it seemed bigger, more defined. I almost pulled over then, but I was behind schedule and couldn't afford the delay. I promised myself I'd bring my camera next time, maybe even take a closer look if I had time. So August 7th rolls around. I'm hauling restaurant equipment for a new place opening in Vegas. Nothing unusual about the cargo or the trip. I remember feeling good that day. Weather was clear, traffic was light, my truck was running smooth. I'd packed extra water, my camera, even a pair of binoculars. Everything was normal until I hit that stretch of US 93 that cuts through the Black Mountains. It was around 10:30 at night. The road was practically empty, just me and the occasional car passing in the opposite direction. I had the radio on low, some classic rock station fading in and out as I wound through the mountains. Then I saw it again, but different this time. Much different. It wasn't just visible, it was impossible to miss. This enormous structure rising from the valley floor, glowing with this internal blue-white light. It looked like someone had taken a skyscraper made of glass or crystal and just dropped it in the middle of nowhere. The angles were wrong somehow, like they didn't follow normal geometry. Looking at it made my eyes hurt, but I couldn't look away. I remember saying out loud, "What the hell is that?" I hit my turn signal almost without thinking. There's this road, Coyote Pass Road, that branches off the highway there. It leads to a viewpoint that overlooks the valley. I'd never stopped there before, but something was pulling me toward it, a curiosity I couldn't fight. That's when things started getting weird. My dash cam cut out. All the gauges on my instrument panel went haywire. The temperature gauge dropped from 90 degrees to freezing in seconds. My skin broke out in goosebumps. The radio turned to static, then silence. For a second, I felt like the truck was in multiple places at once, like I was driving and parked and skidding all simultaneously. My head started pounding with this weird pressure. I pulled into this wide turnout at the viewpoint and shut off the engine. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the key. I hit the hazards, grabbed my phone and my water bottle, and just sat there for a minute trying to process what I was seeing. The structure in the valley was even more impossible up close. It had to be at least 40 stories tall, but with no visible windows or doors. Just this massive crystalline tower with geometric patterns shifting across its surface. The glow pulsed like it was breathing, and the longer I looked at it, the more I felt this pull, like it was calling to me specifically. I wrote in my logbook. I remember exactly what I wrote. Unusual mirage-like structure visible from highway. Pulling off to investigate. That seems so inadequate now, but I didn't know what else to call it. It wasn't a mirage. Mirages don't make your fillings hurt or cause every hair on your body to stand on end. I got out of the truck, locked it behind me out of habit, and walked toward the edge of the turnout. There was a small hiking path leading down into the valley. I don't know why, but I started following it. Something was drawing me forward, not like mind control or anything. I was still me, still making my own decisions, but there was this overwhelming curiosity and fascination I couldn't shake. The air got colder as I walked down the path. Unnaturally cold for an Arizona night in August. My breath was fogging in front of my face. The structure seemed to be getting closer, but at the same time it didn't seem like I was making any progress toward it. It's hard to explain, like those dreams where you're running but staying in place. About 50 yards down the path, I reached this flat rock surface. The structure looked massive now, filling my entire field of vision. The light was so bright I had to squint, but it didn't hurt my eyes like normal brightness. It was like looking at the northern lights, if they were solid and architectural. I stepped onto the rock, and that's when everything shifted. I felt a sensation like being underwater, this pressure all around me. The air felt thick, almost liquid. The temperature dropped even further. I could see my breath crystallizing in front of me, and then I heard it. A sound like nothing I've ever experienced. Not loud, but everywhere, coming from inside my head and from miles away simultaneously. A harmonious vibration that seemed to resonate with my bones. It wasn't mechanical or electronic. It wasn't human. It was like the sound the universe might make if you could hear it thinking. I took another step forward, and the world folded. That's the only way I can describe it. Like reality was a piece of paper that someone folded in half, then in half again, connecting points that should be separate. One moment I was on that flat rock, and the next I was standing on a ledge high above the valley floor, miles from where I'd started. The crystalline structure was below me now, and from this angle it looked completely different, like a hole in reality rather than a building. A perfect geometric absence where something should be. Looking at it made me feel like I was falling even though I was standing still. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. There were shapes moving around the structure. Not people, not animals, something else. They moved in ways that didn't make physical sense, like they were taking shortcuts through space itself. When I tried to focus on one, it seemed to split into multiple copies of itself before reforming. I felt this overwhelming sense that I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to see, something human minds aren't equipped to process. I backed away from the edge, heart pounding, and that's when my hat, my company cap with the metal logo, flew off my head. It didn't feel like wind took it. It felt like it was pulled off by some invisible force. I reached for it instinctively and lost my balance. I didn't fall, but I stumbled back against the rock face behind me. When I looked up again, everything had changed. The structure was gone. The strange shapes were gone. The unnatural cold was gone. Just normal desert night, stars overhead, the distant glow of the highway visible through the mountains. I was completely disoriented. My phone showed no signal, and the time was wrong. It said it was only 10:58, but it felt like I'd been out there for hours. I tried to find my way back to the truck, but nothing looked familiar. I spent what felt like the entire night wandering, trying to find the path back up to the turnout. At some point I must have, I don't know, this is where things get fuzzy. I remember feeling exhausted. I remember sitting down just for a moment to rest. And then, nothing, just blackness. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital in Kingman. They said a hiker found me unconscious about 6 miles from where my truck was parked. Severe dehydration, mild hypothermia despite the August heat, and no memory of how I got there. My truck was found right where I left it, locked up tight with the hazard still blinking. All my stuff was inside, wallet, company phone, everything except the keys and my cap. The police questioned me for hours. They showed me the dash cam footage that cut out right when I said, "What the hell is that?" They asked about drugs, about my mental health, about whether I was trying to abandon my cargo. The company suspended me pending investigation. My ex-wife flew in and looked at me like I was a stranger. 2 months later, some hikers found my cap on that same ledge where I'd somehow been transported. The metal company logo was partially melted, but the rest of the cap was fine. The police said I must have gone there myself and damaged the cap, but they couldn't explain how. That ledge is nearly impossible to reach without climbing gear, which I definitely didn't have with me. I've tried to find others who've experienced similar things. There's a few. That driver, Marcus, I mentioned, a woman named Jessica who had her car die in the same area, a guy named Raphael who felt the same weird pressure in his head. But most people just avoid that stretch of highway now, especially at night. They call it the glitch zone or the fold. Truckers request different routes. Nobody wants to talk about why. I lost my job, lost my apartment because I couldn't make rent, had to move in with my sister Catherine for a while. She believes me at least. She remembers me telling her about the strange structure weeks before it all went down. I still don't know what happened that night. Was it some kind of government experiment? A natural phenomenon science can't explain? Something not from here? All I know is that for 17 seconds, according to my truck's sensors, the temperature dropped 55 degrees instantly. For 17 seconds, I was somewhere else. And part of me feels like I never fully came back. I haven't driven a truck since. I haven't even been able to get behind the wheel of a car without having a panic attack. Sometimes at night, I still feel that strange pressure in my head, that pull towards something I can't see. And sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I hear that sound again, that impossible harmonic vibration that feels like the universe thinking. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I just needed to write it down. Because it happened. It was real, and whatever it was, it's still out there in that desert valley, folding reality around itself like paper. Story 11. I've never told anyone outside our friend group about what happened that night at the old church on Olmo Street. Even now, typing this out, my hands are getting clammy, and I keep glancing over my shoulder. It's been 7 years, but the memory still makes my skin crawl. I grew up in Carvalho Vale, a town so small you probably couldn't find it on a map. Nothing exciting ever happened there. One main street with a few shops, a public square where the elderly played chess, and endless fields surrounding us. For teenagers like us, boredom was our biggest enemy. That's how our little tradition started. Me, Luana, Giselle, João, Marcelo, and Aline. We'd been friends since elementary school, and by the time we hit 16, we'd started exploring abandoned buildings around town. It was stupid and dangerous, looking back, but at that age we felt invincible. And honestly, those abandoned places gave us a thrill nothing else in our boring town could match. The old church at 198 Olmo Street became our favorite spot. It had been abandoned for decades, a crumbling stone structure with broken stained glass windows and a partially collapsed roof. The property was surrounded by a tall metal gate with spikes at the top, but we'd found a spot where the bars were bent just enough that we could squeeze through if we were careful. Getting inside was part of the adventure. We'd climb through a side window where someone had removed the glass years ago. The window was about 6 feet off the ground, so we'd boost each other up, laughing and cursing when someone would inevitably slip and fall on their ass. The church's main floor had been stripped down to dirt and broken floorboards. Right in the center was this concrete staircase leading down to a basement. Yeah, a church with a basement. That always struck me as weird. Down there were 3 small rooms that might have been used for storage or meetings back when the church was active. The walls were covered in peeling paint and water stains, and the air had this musty, damp smell that would stick to your clothes. It was an autumn night, unusually cold for our region. The 6 of us had planned to meet at the church around 9 at night. I remember I was wearing my favorite hoodie, blue with a faded band logo, and I'd brought a flashlight and a backpack with some beers I'd stolen from my dad's fridge. When I arrived, Luana and João were already waiting by the gate. Luana had brought candles, which seemed fitting for a church, even a decrepit one. Giselle showed up next, then Marcelo and Aline arrived together. They'd been dating for a few months by then. "Took you long enough," Joan said when they walked up. "We're freezing our asses off out here." We helped each other climb the gate, being extra careful of the spikes at the top. The metal was ice cold against my palms, and the whole structure creaked under our weight. Once we were all over, we crossed the overgrown yard, our shoes crunching on dead leaves and broken branches. The church loomed above us, a dark silhouette against the night sky. There was no moon that night, which made everything seem extra creepy. We used our phone flashlights to find the window, and one by one we climbed inside. As always, we headed straight for the basement. The concrete stairs were cracked and uneven, and we had to watch our step to avoid tripping. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended. Basements are always colder, but this one felt like a refrigerator. We set up in the largest of the 3 rooms. Luana arranged the candles in a circle, and their flickering light cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. I distributed the beers, and we settled in, sitting on the floor, sharing stories and jokes. For a while it was just like any other night. 6 friends hanging out, laughing, enjoying the forbidden thrill of being somewhere we shouldn't. It must have been around 11 when it happened. We were in the middle of a stupid drinking game when there was a loud bang from one of the other rooms. It sounded like a door slamming with incredible force, the kind of slam that makes the walls shake. We all froze. The laughter died instantly. "What the fuck was that?" Giselle whispered, her eyes wide. Before anyone could answer, we heard something else, a scraping sound like furniture being dragged across the floor. Luana jumped to her feet. "I'm out of here," she said, her voice shaking. João and Giselle were right behind her. They bolted for the stairs without looking back, leaving me, Marcelo, and Aline sitting there in shock. "Guys, wait!" Aline called after them, but they were already thundering up the stairs. The 3 of us exchanged looks. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I'm sure they could see it in mine. But there was curiosity too, at least for me. A part of me wanted to know what had made that noise. "It's probably just the building settling," Marcelo said, trying to sound brave, but his voice cracked. "Or an animal got in," I suggested, not believing it for a second. Aline gripped Marcelo's arm. "We should go too." "Hold on," I said, standing up slowly. "Let's just check it out, the 3 of us together." I don't know why I suggested it. Maybe it was the beer. Or maybe it was just that I couldn't stand the thought of running away without knowing. Either way, after a moment's hesitation, Marcelo nodded. "Fine, but we look quick, and then we go," he said. The door that had slammed was at the end of a short hallway. It was partially open now, a sliver of darkness between the door and the frame. I led the way, my phone flashlight held out in front of me like a shield. Marcelo and Aline followed close behind, their breathing loud in the silence. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing at the creak of the hinges. The room beyond was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with a dirt floor and stone walls. And right in the center stood an old wooden dresser with a mirror. The dresser looked completely out of place, like someone had deliberately put it there. It was made of dark wood, ornately carved, with a large oval mirror on top. But what made my blood run cold was what I saw on the mirror's surface. Red stains, smeared across the glass in uneven streaks. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The stains were wet and sticky looking in the beam of my flashlight. "Is that blood?" Aline whispered, her voice barely audible. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the surface of the mirror. My finger came away with a red smear. It was still wet. "Someone's been here," Marcelo said, "recently." That's when I noticed something else on the dresser, a photograph. It was old, black and white, showing a woman in a wedding dress. She was smiling at the camera, but there was something deeply unsettling about her expression. Her eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. "Guys," I whispered, "we need to go. Now." As if on cue, we heard another noise, this time from one of the other rooms. A thud, followed by what sounded like footsteps. Aline let out a small whimper. "Oh my God." We didn't need any more convincing. We turned and ran back to the main room, frantically gathering our things. I stuffed the beer cans into my backpack, not caring that one was still half full and spilling everywhere. Luana's candles were still burning and Marcelo quickly blew them out, plunging us into near darkness. We scrambled up the stairs, our feet slipping on the concrete. I could hear Aline crying behind me, and Marcelo was breathing so hard it sounded painful. The main floor of the church seemed even darker than before, the shadows deeper and more threatening. We made our way to the window we'd entered through, helping each other climb out. My hands were shaking so badly I almost fell, but Marcelo caught me and pushed me through. Once outside, we ran across the yard to the gate. That's when I made the mistake of looking back. There, in the window we'd just climbed out of, was a silhouette, a human shape standing perfectly still, watching us. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark outline against the deeper darkness of the church interior. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was watching us. I didn't say anything to the others. We climbed over the gate and ran all the way to the main street, where we finally stopped, gasping for breath. Our other 3 friends were nowhere to be seen. They must have run straight home. "Did you see that?" Marcelo finally asked, his face pale in the streetlight. "See what?" Aline asked, looking between us. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Let's just go home." We walked together until we had to split up to go to our respective houses. None of us mentioned coming back to the church. We all knew our exploring days were over. The next day, I texted everyone to make sure they got home okay. They had, but no one wanted to talk about what happened. Over the next few weeks, we gradually stopped hanging out as a group. It was like that night had broken something between us, a shared innocence maybe, or just the illusion that we were invincible. 7 years passed. I went to college in another city, got a job, moved on with my life. But I never forgot about that night. The image of the mirror with those red stains, the photograph of the bride with her disturbing smile, and especially that silhouette in the window, they haunted my dreams. Last year I went back to Carvalho Vale for my parents' anniversary. After the celebration, I found myself driving down Olmo Street, almost without meaning to. When I reached number 198, I had to pull over in shock. The church was gone, completely demolished. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. The metal gate was still there, rusted and bent, but everything else had vanished. I parked my car and walked up to the gate, peering through the bars. There was no sign that a building had ever stood there, no foundation, no rubble, nothing. It was as if the church had never existed. When I got back to my parents' house, I asked them about it. They looked confused and told me there had never been a church on Olmo Street, at least not in their lifetime. I tried to argue, describing the building in detail, but they just exchanged worried glances. That night, I went online and searched for any information about a church in Carvalho Vale, especially one on Olmo Street. I found nothing. I even reached out to Luana, the only one of our old group I still occasionally talk to, but she changed the subject immediately. I don't know what we encountered that night. I don't know whose blood was on that mirror, or who the bride in the photograph was, or who, or what, was watching us from the window. Sometimes I wonder if it really happened at all, or if it was some shared hallucination. But then I remember the cold touch of the mirror, the sticky red substance on my finger, the absolute terror I felt when I saw that silhouette. Those things were real. They had to be. Whatever it was, I'm just grateful we weren't alone that night. I'm grateful we got out when we did. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing from a nightmare I can't quite remember, I wonder if we really got away at all, or if whatever was in that church is still watching us, waiting. Story 12. I've been debating whether to post this for months. I'm not looking for attention or trying to convince anyone of anything. I just need to tell someone what happened to me because I can't keep carrying this alone. My therapist thinks writing it down might help, but she doesn't believe what actually happened. Nobody does. I worked, I guess, the night shift at Sandstone Junction truck stop off US Route 95 in Nevada. It's this little oasis of light between Vegas and Reno, where there's basically nothing for hours in either direction, just desert, mountains, and darkness. The kind of place where the night sky is so clear you can see every star, but also the kind of place where the darkness feels heavy. The night it happened was March 17th of this year. I was working alone like usual. We get decent traffic during the day, but after midnight it's mostly just the occasional long-haul trucker stopping for coffee and a bathroom break. The shift was normal, boring even. I'd already cleaned the bathrooms, restocked the coolers, and was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the radio crackled to life at around 3 in the morning. Our truck stop keeps an emergency radio for stranded motorists. It's an old system, but cell service is spotty out here, so it's still useful. When it came on, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It had been silent for so long, I'd forgotten it was there. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, we need help." The voice was female, shaky with panic. I grabbed the receiver. "This is Sandstone Junction. What's your emergency?" "Oh, thank God." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Our SUV broke down about 2 miles east of you on 95. We've been trying to flag someone down, but there's no traffic and..." She hesitated. "I think there's something out there with us." My first thought was wildlife. We get coyotes, sometimes mountain lions. "Are you in immediate danger? How many people are with you?" "It's me, my husband, and our 2 kids. We're inside the car, but..." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There are lights on the ridge across from us. They've been tracking us." Lights on the ridge could mean other people, maybe hunters, though it wasn't hunting season. I told her I'd call highway patrol and keep the line open. I made the call, explained the situation, and the dispatcher said they'd send someone, but it would take at least 40 minutes to reach that location. When I got back on the radio, the woman's voice was more urgent. "They're getting closer. The lights. They're moving down the ridge. Highway patrol is on the way," I assured her. "Stay in your vehicle with the doors locked." "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "They're not normal lights. They move wrong, too smooth, too deliberate." I thought maybe she was just freaked out by being stranded in the dark. The desert plays tricks on your eyes, especially at night. "Can you see the highway from your location?" I asked, trying to keep her focused. "Yes, but..." There was a pause, and I heard her speaking to someone else. "Brian says he can't get the engine to turn over at all now, and the flashlights are dying. Everything electronic is failing." That was weird, but not impossible. Maybe their alternator was shot. But then she said something that made my skin crawl. "They're looking in the windows now." "Who is?" I asked, my mouth going dry. I can't really see them. Just shapes, dark shapes against the stars." I heard a child crying in the background and the woman's hushed attempts to calm them. Then a man's voice came on the radio. His tone was different, calm but tight, like someone trying to hold it together. "This is Brian. Something very strange is happening here. I think we're experiencing some kind of, I don't even know what to call it. The time on my watch keeps resetting to 3:17. Then the radio went silent for about 30 seconds. When it came back, the signal was weaker, with a staticky quality that hadn't been there before. "Incident report 437B. It was a different male voice, official sounding. "March 17th, 1973. Highway patrol found no signs of the missing family. Vehicle appeared to have been abandoned. No footprints leading away from the scene. Investigation ongoing." I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. 1973? That was exactly 50 years ago, to the day. "Hello," I called into the radio. "Brian, are you still there?" The woman's voice returned, but it sounded different, distant and hollow. "My name is Eleanor Sanderson. We've been trapped here in between for so long. They won't let us go." "Who won't let you go?" I asked, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the receiver. "The entities, the ones that appear as lights. They study us. They study our fear. They make us repeat this night over and over. Every time we think we're going to escape, the night just resets." I tried to rationalize what I was hearing. Maybe this was an elaborate prank. Maybe I was so tired I was hallucinating, but the terror in her voice felt too real. Highway patrol is on their way, I repeated, not knowing what else to say. They won't find us, she said. They never do. Not really. They only find the empty car. I was about to respond when movement outside the window caught my eye. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it clearly. A small figure, like a child, standing at the edge of the floodlit parking lot. "There's a kid outside," I said, half to myself. "Don't go out there." Eleanor's voice crackled urgently through the radio. "That's what they do. They take forms that make you want to help. My son Tommy, they use him the most." But I was already moving toward the door. If there was a child out there alone in the dark, I couldn't just leave them. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside into the cool desert air. The small figure was still there, motionless. As I approached, I called out, "Hey there, are you okay?" The child didn't respond, didn't move. When I got within about 20 feet, the floodlight above me flickered, and in that split second of darkness, the child's shape changed. It was still roughly human-sized, but the proportions were wrong. The arms too long, the head too large and oddly shaped. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The floodlight stabilized and the figure looked like a normal child again, but I knew what I'd seen. "They can mimic," Eleanor's voice came through my handheld radio. "They can look like anything, sound like anyone. They've gotten so good at it over the decades." I started backing toward the building, keeping my eyes on the figure. It tilted its head, then took a step toward me. Another step. The movement was wrong, too fluid, like it wasn't actually walking but gliding with the appearance of steps. I ran back inside and locked the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I looked out the window again, the figure was gone, but now there were lights on the ridge behind the truck stop, the same lights Eleanor had described. "They're here," I whispered into the radio. "They followed our signal to you," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. We just wanted someone to know. We just wanted someone to help us." The radio crackled again, and a child's voice came through. "Linda, can you help me, Linda? I'm scared." My blood turned to ice. I'd never told them my name. The lights outside were moving down the ridge now, approaching the truck stop. Inside, the fluorescent lights began to flicker, and the coffee machine behind the counter turned itself on and off repeatedly. "How do I stop them?" I demanded, fighting to keep panic from overtaking me. There was a long silence, and I thought I'd lost the connection. Then Brian's voice returned. "The frequency. They can't stand certain frequencies. In '73, I was a radio engineer. I've been trying different signals each time the night repeats. There's one they react to, 439 megahertz. It disrupts whatever they are." Just then, all the power in the truck stop went out. Complete darkness engulfed me, except for the eerie glow of those approaching lights outside. In the darkness, I heard tapping on the windows, light at first, then more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and made my way to the back office where we kept emergency supplies. There was a battery-powered radio there, and I remembered we had a PA system for the parking lot that operated on a separate circuit with a backup generator. As I worked to connect the radio to the PA system, voices called to me from outside, some sounding like Eleanor, some like Brian, some like children, and some like my own co-workers. They called my name, begged for help, told me to just open the door. With shaking hands, I tuned the radio to 439 megahertz and cranked the volume to maximum. Nothing happened at first, just static. But then I noticed the tapping had stopped. The voices went silent. I connected it to the PA system and turned it on. The static blasted across the parking lot, unnaturally loud in the quiet desert night. Outside, the lights began to move erratically, darting back and forth like they were in pain. They shot up into the sky, then disappeared over the ridge. Minutes later, the power came back on. The radio went silent, and when I tried to contact Eleanor again, there was no response. Highway patrol arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the area but found no disabled vehicle, no stranded family. The officer looked at me strangely when I described what had happened, especially when he ran the name, Sanderson. "That's weird," he said slowly. "There was a family with that name, the Sandersons, who disappeared out here in '73. Same spot you described, same date, March 17th. It's one of those unsolved mysteries from before my time." I showed him the radio logs, tried to play back the recorded transmissions, but there was nothing there, just hours of static. The security cameras showed me moving around the store, talking into the radio, going outside briefly, then running back in, but no child figure, no lights on the ridge. According to the footage, I was alone the whole time. They had me checked out at the hospital. The official report blamed carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater for what they called my hallucinations. I didn't argue. What was the point? I quit that job the next day, but it doesn't matter. Every night since then, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, my home radio turns itself on. Through the static, I hear Eleanor's voice just for a moment. "Thank you for trying, but be careful now. They found others after us, after you. I've tried moving, changing jobs, even throwing away every radio I own. Nothing helps. I still hear them calling in the night. I still see movement at the edges of my vision. Tall, wrong-proportioned figures watching from a distance. I still wake up sometimes to find my digital clock stuck at 3:17, no matter what time it actually is. I don't know what those things are or what they want. I don't know if the Sandersons are still trapped in that night from 50 years ago. All I know is that I heard them. I saw what I saw, and now I can't escape it either. If you're ever driving through Nevada on Route 95 at night and your car breaks down near Sandstone Junction, don't use the radio. Don't look at the lights on the ridge. And whatever you do, don't trust what you see outside your windows. They can look like anyone now, even me." Story 13. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone out there has experienced something similar or has information that might help me make sense of what happened. It's been 13 years, and I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about it. It was Easter Sunday 2010. My mom, Sadie, was 70 at the time and had been getting more forgetful, so I'd started accompanying her to church events. When Pastor Harrington announced he'd arranged a special sunrise service at Eastern State Penitentiary, Mom was weirdly excited about it. I remember thinking it was strange because she'd never mentioned any interest in the old prison before. For those who don't know, Eastern State is this massive Gothic-style prison in Philadelphia that operated from 1829 to 1971. It looks like a medieval castle from the outside, with these huge stone walls and guard towers. Inside, it's all crumbling cells and long, eerie corridors that seem to go on forever. Nowadays, it's a museum and tourist attraction, famous for its Halloween events, but there's something deeply unsettling about it even in daylight. We arrived around 6 in the morning. It was still dark and the prison looked even more imposing than usual. About 40 people from our congregation showed up for the service in the central rotunda, this massive circular hub where all the cell blocks connect. The space was lit with candles and portable lights, creating these long shadows that seemed to move on their own against the stone walls. During the service, I noticed Mom kept looking around nervously, not paying attention to Pastor Harrington. I leaned over to ask if she was okay, and she whispered, "I don't think we should be here." Before I could ask why, she just shook her head and faced forward again. The service itself was odd. I'm not particularly religious, but I've been to enough church events to know when something feels off. There were these long pauses between prayers where the silence seemed to press in from all sides. A few times I could have sworn I heard distant sounds, like metal doors closing or keys jangling, even though that part of the prison was supposed to be empty. Elena Vasquez, who was in the choir, later told investigators she heard whispering during one of these pauses, "She's the one. Easter's bride. She'll do." At the time, I didn't hear it myself, but thinking back, I remember Elena looking disturbed and missing her cue to sing. After the service ended around 7:30, everyone was gathering their things when Mum suddenly grabbed my arm. "My purse," she said, looking panicked. "I left it by the chair." She'd brought this old handbag she was particularly attached to, a worn leather thing that had belonged to her mother. "I'll get it," I told her. "Wait here with Pastor Harrington." I headed back to the rotunda. The maintenance staff were already starting to clear away the chairs. I found Mum's purse tucked under the seat where she'd been sitting and picked it up. That's when I felt like someone was watching me. I turned around, and I swear I saw a dark figure standing in one of the corridors that branched off from the rotunda. It was just for a second, and when I blinked, there was nothing there. I remember checking my watch. It was 7:48, and thinking we needed to get going because Mom had a doctor's appointment later that day. I started walking back toward the exit. That's the last thing I clearly remember. According to everyone else, I never came back. Mom waited 15 minutes before getting worried and asking Pastor Harrington if he'd seen me. When I didn't turn up, they started searching. Security was called, and they did a sweep of the accessible areas. Nothing. Mom's purse was found in the rotunda, but there was no sign of me. The police were called, and they reviewed the security footage. It showed me entering the rotunda at 7:48 a.m., just like I remembered. But no camera caught me leaving, even though I would have had to pass at least one to exit the building. It was like I'd vanished into thin air. Obviously, I didn't vanish. I'm here writing this, but I have no memory of what happened between picking up that purse and waking up 3 days later in an alley about 2 miles from Eastern State. I was dehydrated, confused, and had this strange mark on my wrist, a small circular burn about the size of a dime. I still have the scar. When I stumbled into a convenience store to ask for help, the clerk thought I was on drugs. Can't blame him. I must have looked terrible. The police were called, and I was taken to the hospital. My story made no sense to anyone, least of all me. During those 3 days I was missing, the investigation had uncovered some disturbing things. Several people who attended the service reported strange experiences, hearing noises from empty cell blocks, seeing shadows move against the walls. One older man said he felt someone breathing on his neck during a moment of silent prayer, but when he turned around, no one was there. 3 days after I disappeared, the same day I mysteriously reappeared, a maintenance worker at Eastern State discovered disturbed brickwork in a sealed-off section of the underground tunnel system. The mortar between some of the bricks looked freshly damaged. When they removed the bricks, they found a narrow passage leading to a chamber that wasn't on any official blueprint of the prison. Inside this hidden room were items that still give me nightmares: a lantern, water bottles, and a chair with restraint marks on the arms, as if someone had been struggling against ropes or zip ties. My watch was found on the floor near the chair. The most disturbing discovery was dozens of Polaroid photographs arranged in a cross pattern on one wall. They showed visitors to the prison, all taken without their knowledge. My photo was at the center of the cross. In it, I was standing in the rotunda holding Mom's purse, looking over my shoulder with an expression of alarm. It must have been taken seconds before I disappeared. The police also found an old leather-bound journal in the chamber. It detailed a bizarre ritual practiced since 1943 by a group of guards and prisoners who called themselves the Watchers. They believed that offering a pure soul during Easter sunrise would grant them spiritual freedom and eternal life. The journal entries described selecting candidates years in advance and watching them until the appointed time. Behind another section of brickwork in the chamber, investigators discovered human remains. 7 individuals who had disappeared between 1953 and 1994, all on or near Easter Sunday, with gaps of exactly 5 years between disappearances. 5 women and 2 men, ranging in age from 22 to 45. None of their cases had ever been connected before. I should have been the 8th victim. The case took an even stranger turn when investigators discovered a connection to my family. Historical records showed that Reverend Isaiah Winters had served as the prison's Protestant chaplain from 1934 to 1951 and was my great-grandfather. Mom had never mentioned this connection. and when questioned, she claimed she had no knowledge of it because she'd been adopted as an infant. But here's where it gets really weird. In an archival photograph from Easter 1943, researchers noticed a child standing beside Chaplain Winters who looked remarkably like Mom. But Mom was born in 1950, 7 years after the photo was taken. When investigators showed her the photograph, she became extremely agitated and refused to discuss it further. 1 week after being confronted with this photograph, Mom disappeared from her assisted living facility. The staff said she seemed perfectly normal that morning, even helping with breakfast preparations. But when they checked her room at lunch, she was gone. The only thing left behind was an old iron key later identified as belonging to Eastern State Penitentiary's chaplain's office. Despite extensive searches, Mom was never found. Neither was I, at least not the real me. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. Since that Easter, I've been having these episodes, blackouts where I lose hours or sometimes days. I'll wake up in strange places with no memory of how I got there. Once I came to in my apartment to find I'd written the same phrase over and over on dozens of pieces of paper. Easter's bride returns when the 5th year comes. I've seen doctors, therapists, neurologists. They've diagnosed me with PTSD, dissociative disorder, even temporal lobe epilepsy. The medications help with the anxiety, but not with the blackouts or the feeling that I'm not alone in my own body. Last month, I found a journal in my desk drawer that I don't remember buying or writing in. The handwriting isn't mine, but the entries detail my daily activities as if someone has been observing me from inside my own head. The last entry reads, "The vessel is weakening. Soon we will need another. The chaplain's bloodline continues elsewhere." I've started researching my family history, trying to track down any relatives I might have through my great-grandfather. So far, I've discovered 3 distant cousins, all of whom have reported strange experiences around Easter, hearing voices, time they can't account for, feeling watched. Each Easter since the incident, anonymous offerings of Easter lilies appear at the sealed tunnel entrance at Eastern State despite increased security measures. Security cameras in that section regularly malfunction, particularly around Easter. I know because I've been back to check, drawn there by something I can't explain. Eastern State no longer permits Easter services or any special events around that holiday. The hidden chamber was sealed behind concrete, and that part of the tunnel system is off limits even to staff. But sometimes when I stand outside those massive walls, I swear I can hear whispering, "She'll return." They all return. I don't know what happened to me during those 3 missing days, or why I was released when the others weren't. I don't know what happened to Mom, or if she was somehow involved in what these watchers were doing. All I know is that Easter is coming again, and this will be the 13th year since it happened. 5 years since the 8th anniversary, which I spent unconscious in my apartment with no memory of the entire day. I'm writing this now because I'm afraid of what might happen next month when Easter comes. If I disappear again, at least there will be a record of what I know and what I suspect. If anyone has information about Eastern State, the Watchers, or similar experiences, please reach out. I need answers before it's too late. Story 14. I still get sick to my stomach whenever Easter comes around. What happened in 2013 completely destroyed any joy I once had for the holiday. I've been debating whether to share this for years, but after what happened last weekend, I need to get this off my chest. I was a volunteer at Pinewood's annual Easter egg hunt that year. My son Tyler was 11 then, and even though he was getting a little old for egg hunts, he still wanted to participate. Pinewood is a small town in northern Michigan, and our Easter celebration at Lakefront Park was always a big deal. Everyone turned out for it, one of those community traditions that brings the whole town together. The morning started normally enough. It was chilly but sunny, perfect spring weather. I helped set up the different hunting zones, toddler area, elementary kids, and the big kids section for the older ones like Tyler. We had thousands of eggs hidden throughout. The park, Some had candy, others had little toys, and a few special golden eggs contained gift certificates donated by local businesses. Tyler was excited because he'd never found a golden egg before, and this was probably going to be his last year participating. When the hunt began, all the kids scattered across the park like a swarm of bees. Parents with cameras followed, laughing and pointing out eggs their kids missed. Normal, happy chaos. About 20 minutes into the hunt, I was restocking some areas that had been picked clean when Tyler came running up to me waving a golden egg. His face wasn't excited though. He looked confused and a little scared. "Mom, there's something weird in this egg," he said, handing it to me. I expected to find a gift certificate for ice cream or the movie theater. Instead, there was a yellowed piece of paper folded inside. The paper looked old, like something from an antique book. When I unfolded it, my blood went cold. Written in dark brownish ink was a message. "I see you through the trees. You'll be the next to disappear. Easter Sunday claims another child." I immediately thought it was some sick joke by one of the teenage volunteers. I pulled the event coordinator aside and showed her the note. She was horrified and had no idea how it got there. She'd personally stuffed all the golden eggs herself the night before. While we were trying to figure this out, parents started approaching us with their own concerns. Several reported finding empty plastic eggs with tiny holes poked in them, and some had this strange brownish residue inside. I felt my stomach twist when I saw them, the same color as the ink on the note Tyler found. Then someone started screaming. Little Emma Collins, a 3-year-old from my neighborhood, was missing from the toddler area. Her mom was hysterical, said she'd turned her back for maybe 30 seconds to help another child, and Emma was gone. Everyone dropped what they were doing to search. Police were called immediately. I held Tyler's hand so tight he complained it hurt, but I wasn't letting him out of my sight. We joined the search, combing through bushes and checking around the playground equipment. The entire mood of the event had shifted from joy to panic in minutes. 45 minutes later, one of the groundskeepers found Emma. She was inside the maintenance shed on the far side of the park, a building that was supposed to be locked. When they brought her out, she seemed totally fine, not scared or upset at all. That was strange enough, but what really freaked everyone out was what they found with her. 12 hollow plastic eggs were arranged in a perfect circle around where she'd been sitting, not scattered randomly, a perfect circle. I saw them when I walked over with Tyler. The eggs were empty, with those same tiny holes. When Emma's mom asked her what happened, she just smiled and said, "The Easter rabbit took me to see where the eggs are born." Her mom tried to get more information, but Emma just kept saying the same thing about the Easter rabbit showing her where eggs are born. She didn't seem traumatized, which somehow made it even creepier. While the police were interviewing witnesses, one of the officers found something behind the shed that made my skin crawl, a freshly dug hole, about the size of a child. Next to it was a brand new Easter-themed shovel, the kind you'd buy in a kid's gardening set with bunnies painted on the handle. It hadn't been there the day before when the park was prepped for the event. I know because I'd helped check the entire grounds. By now, most parents had gathered their kids and left. The police asked everyone to stay for questioning, but people were scared. I wanted to leave too, but since I was a volunteer, I stayed to help with the investigation. Detective Sarah Reynolds took charge of the scene. I knew her from community events. She had kids in the same school as Tyler. She took the note from the golden egg and had it sent to the lab. Later that day, she called to tell me the results. The ink was human blood, about 3 to 4 weeks old. I threw up after that call. Over the next few days, details started emerging that made the whole thing even more disturbing. Detective Reynolds discovered similar incidents in counties surrounding Pinewood over the past decade. Children temporarily disappearing during Easter celebrations, only to be found in locked rooms or closets, always with Easter items arranged around them. None of the kids had been harmed, but none could explain how they got there either. Then a local historian got involved. He'd been documenting Pinewood's history for years and remembered something about Easter disappearances. He dug through newspaper archives and found articles from 1912 through 1923 documenting children who vanished on Easter Sunday. Unlike the recent cases, those children were never found. The disappearances had stopped after police arrested a local craftsman named Jonathan Marsh, who made decorated Easter eggs and children's toys. They couldn't prove anything, so they had to release him. But shortly after, he killed himself. He left a note that just said, "I will continue the hunt in another life." I couldn't sleep after learning this. I kept checking on Tyler throughout the night, making sure he was still in his bed. He started having nightmares, saying there was someone watching him from outside his window. I installed security cameras the next day. About a week after the hunt, I got a call from Detective Reynolds. Lab results showed the soil inside the hollow eggs matched specific regions in Eastern Europe known for traditional egg decorating, places like Ukraine and Romania. Nobody could explain how this soil ended up in eggs at our small-town Michigan Easter hunt. Even more disturbing, children who participated in the hunt started reporting strange dreams. Several kids who didn't know each other and hadn't talked described dreams about the people under the ground who wanted to come up for Easter. My son was one of them. He woke up screaming one night, saying he dreamed about a man who lived underground and collected children like Easter eggs. The creepiest part involved 8-year-old Mason Delaney, a friend of my neighbor's kid. During questioning, he mentioned finding an egg near Harold Wickham's grave. When asked how he knew that name, Mason couldn't explain it. Detective Reynolds checked with the Cemetery Historical Society and discovered there had once been a headstone for Harold Wickham from 1897 in the exact spot where Mason found his egg. The headstone had been moved to a different section of the cemetery decades ago. There's no way Mason could have known that name. Just when we thought things couldn't get weirder, they did. A groundskeeper at Pinewood Cemetery found painted eggshells arranged in a spiral pattern at Jonathan Marsh's grave, the craftsman who'd killed himself a century earlier. At the center was a plastic egg containing a USB drive. The drive had hundreds of images of children from our Easter hunt, including Tyler. Some showed kids unconscious in places they'd never actually been. The metadata said these photos were created years before the actual event. Years before. How is that even possible? The police investigation hit wall after wall. No fingerprints, no suspects, no explanations. They increased security around town, especially near the park and cemetery. People stopped letting their kids play outside. Every year since then, despite cameras and security, a single hollow egg appears somewhere in Lakefront Park on Easter morning. Each one contains a message written in fresh human blood that matches the original sample. The hunt continues. DNA analysis shows it's related to the Marsh family, but that's impossible because Jonathan Marsh's family line ended with his suicide. Last Sunday was Easter. I haven't let Tyler participate in any Easter activities since that day in 2013, but he's 18 now and decided to go to the park with his friends, saying I was being paranoid. He came home pale and shaking. While they were hanging out near the playground, he found a golden egg tucked under the bench where they were sitting. Inside was a yellowed paper with a message. "You've grown so tall, Tyler. I've been watching you for years. Our game isn't over." The police are investigating again, but I know they won't find anything. We're thinking of moving away from Pinewood, but part of me wonders if it would even matter. Whatever this is, this thing that's taken an interest in our town's children, I don't think it's limited by geography. Parents here now warn their kids about the hollow egg man who watches from the edges of Easter celebrations. They think it's just a scary story to keep kids from wandering off. I wish it was just a story. I wish I could explain what happened that day. I wish I could forget the look on Tyler's face when he showed me that note on Sunday. I keep the security cameras on all night now. Sometimes, in the recordings from our backyard, I swear I can see something moving between the trees at the edge of our property. And every Easter morning since 2013, no matter how carefully I lock the doors and windows, I wake up to find a single hollow egg on our kitchen table. Story 15. I still can't believe I'm actually writing this down. It's been 3 weeks and I still wake up in cold sweats, feeling phantom hands grabbing at me from behind. I guess putting it into words might help, even though my therapist says I shouldn't dwell on it. But honestly, how am I supposed to just move on from something like this? So I'm a bartender at the Rusty Nail in Blackwood. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. That night, God, I remember it so vividly. I had just finished a brutal 10-hour shift. Saturday nights are always the worst. Drunk guys hitting on you, people spilling drinks everywhere, and my manager Dave being his usual unhelpful self. By closing time at 2 in the morning, I was dead on my feet. I remember counting my tips while Dave locked up. $87. Not great, not terrible. Just enough to maybe cover the electric bill that was already late. I said goodbye to Dave and headed to my car, this beat-up Honda Civic that's probably older than I am. The parking lot was empty except for Dave's truck and my car. The silence after hours of blaring music and shouting was almost disorienting. I remember sitting in my car for a minute, just staring at nothing, too exhausted to even turn the key. My apartment was about 20 minutes away, but there's this shortcut through Old Mill Road that cuts the drive by like 7 minutes. Not a big difference, but at 2 in the morning when you can barely keep your eyes open, those 7 minutes matter. Old Mill Road is one of those narrow country roads that winds through the forest. No street lights, no houses, just trees on both sides. During the day, it's actually kind of pretty. At night, it's like driving through a tunnel of black. My headlights seemed so pathetically dim against all that darkness. I was maybe halfway home when I saw it. At first, I thought my tired brain was playing tricks on me. There was something in the middle of the road. I slowed down, squinting, and then my stomach dropped. A baby car seat, just sitting there in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes so hard, I nearly hit my head on the steering wheel. My car screeched to a stop maybe 10 feet from the thing. It was one of those gray infant carriers with the handle on top, the kind you snap into a base in your car. My first thought was, holy shit, is there a baby in there? My second thought was more rational. This is a trap. I'm not stupid. I've read those stories about people putting stuff in the road to get women to stop their cars. But that's the kind of thing that happens in cities, right? Not in the middle of nowhere in Blackwood, population 4,000 on a good day. I sat there for maybe 2 minutes just staring at this car seat, my heart hammering in my chest. I cracked my window a little, thinking if there was actually a baby, I'd hear crying. Nothing. Just the sound of wind rustling through trees and my own breathing. Screw it, I remember thinking. I'll just check real quick. I mean, what if there was a baby? What kind of person would I be if I just drove around it and left a baby in the middle of the road? So I got out. I left my car running, headlights on, pointing at the car seat. I remember the cold air hitting me. It was mid-October and the nights were getting chilly. I was still in my work uniform, black jeans and a black t-shirt with the bar's logo, not exactly warm. I approached the car seat slowly. It looked normal enough. There was even a little blanket inside, folded over where a baby's head would be. My hands were shaking as I reached for the blanket. I pulled it back and empty. Just an empty car seat with a blanket. Relief washed over me for about half a second. Then I heard it, the snap of a twig somewhere in the forest behind me. I spun around, but before I could even think about running, someone grabbed me from behind. A hand clamped over my mouth, fingers digging into my cheeks so hard it felt like they'd leave permanent marks. I tried to scream, but all that came out was this pathetic, muffled sound. "Look what we found here," a man's voice said right next to my ear. He sounded amused, like this was all some big joke to him. I tried to struggle, to kick, to do anything, but then something hit the back of my head. Hard. I saw stars, literally saw stars like in the cartoons. Before I could recover, there was another blow, and everything went black. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the taste. Dirt. My face was pressed against the ground, and I had dirt in my mouth, my nose, everywhere. My head was throbbing so badly I thought it might explode. I tried to move and nearly threw up from the pain. I don't know how long I'd been out, but the sky was starting to lighten just a bit. Not sunrise yet, but that pre-dawn grayness. I managed to sit up, which was a whole ordeal in itself. My uniform was ripped in several places. My arms and legs were covered in scratches, some deep enough to have bled. I looked around trying to figure out where I was. Trees, just trees everywhere, and no sign of my car or my phone, which had been in my pocket. They were gone. Everything was gone. I tried to stand up, fell, and tried again. The second time I managed to stay upright, though the world was spinning around me. I had no idea which direction the road was, no idea which way was home, no way to call for help. I started walking. What else could I do? I picked a direction and just went with it, hoping I'd either find the road or some sign of civilization. Every step was agony. My head hurt, my body hurt, and I was terrified that whoever had attacked me was still out there, watching me stumble around. I walked for what felt like hours. The sun had started to rise, which at least gave me some light to see by. I was disoriented, scared, and in pain, but I kept going. What's that saying? Just keep swimming. Well, I just kept walking. Finally, I saw something in the distance. A light, an actual electric light. I practically ran toward it, ignoring the pain shooting through my body. As I got closer, I realized it was a small village, not even a proper town, just a cluster of houses with a single main street. And there, like a beacon, was a sign, Millfield Emergency Clinic. I stumbled in through the doors and collapsed into the first chair I saw. A nurse rushed over, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. "Oh my God, honey, what happened to you?" I tried to explain, but I was crying so hard by that point that the words weren't making sense. They took me to an exam room, checked me over, called the police. The doctor said I had a mild concussion, numerous contusions, and was suffering from exposure. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation. The police showed up about an hour later. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female. They asked me questions, took notes, looked concerned. I told them everything I could remember, which wasn't much after I got hit. 3 days later, they found my car. It had been abandoned near the state highway, about 20 miles from where I was attacked. The inside was trashed, beer cans everywhere, cigarette burns on the seats. My registration and insurance papers scattered around. A week after that, they caught them. It wasn't some elaborate criminal scheme after all. It was just 4 drunk teenagers from the neighboring county who thought it would be funny to scare someone. They'd stolen the car seat from one of their cousins. They admitted to hitting me and taking my car, but swore they'd just left me by the side of the road, not deep in the forest where I woke up. They're awaiting trial now. Their parents have already reached out to my lawyer, trying to settle. As if money could fix what they did to me. As if anything could erase the feeling of that hand over my mouth or the sound of that voice in my ear. I can't drive at night anymore. I can't be alone in my apartment without checking the locks 5, 6, 7 times. I flinch when someone walks behind me. I had to quit my job at the bar because I couldn't handle working night shifts. The worst part is, I don't think those kids even understand what they did. To them, it was just a prank that went too far. To me, it was the night that destroyed my sense of safety forever. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped for that car seat, if I'd just driven around it and kept going. Would I be okay now, or would they have found some other way to target me? Or worse, would they have succeeded in trapping some other woman on that road? I don't have answers. All I have are nightmares and therapy appointments and this constant gnawing fear that won't go away. Evil isn't always some grand conspiracy or master plan. Sometimes it's just 4 bored teenagers who decide your life is worth less than their entertainment. And that's almost scarier, isn't it? Because how do you protect yourself from that kind of random cruelty? How do you ever feel safe again? Story 16. I've been debating whether to share this for weeks now, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid the situation I found myself in. This happened just over a month ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. I work as a nurse at Pine Grove Memorial, the only hospital in our small town. It's usually a pretty quiet place. Everyone knows everyone, that kind of thing. I've lived here all my life and never felt unsafe, even during night shifts. That changed pretty quickly. That night, I was working a double shift because we were short-staffed, as usual. By the time 2 in the morning rolled around, I was exhausted but finally heading home. It was one of those bitingly cold February nights where your breath makes these little clouds in front of your face, the kind where the cold seeps into your bones. The streets were completely empty, not unusual for Pine Grove at that hour. Most people are tucked in bed by 10, honestly. I was taking my usual route home through the Oak Ridge neighborhood, just a few blocks from my apartment. The streetlights cast this eerie yellow glow over everything, and there wasn't a single car in sight. Just silence. I was maybe halfway home when I saw something in the road ahead. At first, I thought it was a garbage bag or something that had blown into the street, but as I got closer, my headlights revealed what was clearly a person lying face down in the middle of the road. My heart dropped. As a nurse, my first instinct was to help. I started slowing down, already mentally going through the steps I'd need to take, check for responsiveness, call 911, start first aid if needed. I was reaching for my hazard lights when something stopped me. The person wasn't moving at all, not even slightly. No shifting, no attempt to get up, nothing. And they were positioned so deliberately. Right in the middle of the lane, where a car would have to stop. A chill went up my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Something felt wrong. I'm not a big person. I'm 5'3" and about 110 pounds, soaking wet. I didn't have anything to defend myself with, not even pepper spray, but I couldn't just drive by if someone was hurt. I slowed down but didn't stop. Instead, I grabbed my phone and called 911 while continuing to drive slowly past the figure in the road. The dispatcher answered, and I started explaining what I was seeing. I'm on Maple Street in the Oak Ridge area, and there's someone lying in the middle of the road. I'm a nurse, but something doesn't feel right about the situation. They're not moving at all, and I'm alone. The dispatcher was asking me for more details when I stopped at a red light at the end of the block. I was still talking, eyes fixed on my rearview mirror watching the figure in the road, when it happened. Bang! Something hit my driver's side window so hard I screamed. I whipped my head around to see a man standing there pounding on my window with his fist. He was trying to open my door handle, yanking at it aggressively. Thank God I always lock my doors. It's just a habit my dad drilled into me. The man was tall, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over his head. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but his eyes, they weren't panicked or concerned. They were focused, calculating. I screamed into the phone, "Someone's trying to get in my car." My voice was shaking so badly I'm not sure the dispatcher understood me at first. Then I glanced in my rearview mirror again, and my blood turned to ice. The person who had been lying in the road was gone, completely gone. It hit me all at once. It was a trap. They had been working together, one to lure people in, one to attack when they stopped, and I had almost fallen for it. The light turned green and I slammed on the gas. The man kept hold of my door handle for a second before letting go. My tires screeched as I accelerated through the intersection, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. The dispatcher was still on the line, telling me to stay calm. She advised me not to go directly home, but to drive around for a few minutes until police could get to the area. I did what she said, driving in circles through the busier streets near the town center, constantly checking my mirrors to make sure I wasn't being followed. After about 15 minutes, she told me officers were patrolling the area and asked if I felt comfortable going home. I was only a few blocks away at that point, so I said yes. I pulled up to my apartment building and parked under the streetlight closest to the entrance. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line until I was safely inside. I sat in my car for a minute, scanning the parking lot and the street. Everything looked normal. No one was around. I gathered my purse and work bag, still on the phone. "I'm going to head in now," I told her. "The lot seems clear." As I was doing one final check of my surroundings, I saw them. 3 men walking along the sidewalk just down the street from my building. One of them was wearing the same dark hoodie I'd seen earlier. I recognized his walk, the way he held himself. And now I could see the other two with him. One was tall and thin, wearing a baseball cap. The third was shorter, stockier. I ducked down in my seat, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "They're here," I whispered into the phone. "The same men, 3 of them. They're walking past my apartment building." The dispatcher immediately said she'd send the patrol car to my location. I stayed crouched down, peering over my dashboard just enough to watch them. They weren't rushing, weren't looking around suspiciously. They were just walking, talking to each other, like they had all the time in the world. They passed my building and continued down the street, eventually turning a corner and disappearing from view. I waited another 5 minutes before I felt brave enough to make a run for the entrance. When I finally got inside my apartment, I locked the door, then checked that it was locked 2 more times. I put a chair under the doorknob, something I'd never done before. I checked every window, every closet behind the shower curtain. I couldn't stop shaking. The police called me about 20 minutes later. They'd patrolled the area but hadn't found anyone matching the descriptions I gave. They took my statement over the phone and said they'd have extra patrols in the area for the next few nights. I didn't sleep at all that night, or much the next few nights either. It's been over a month and I still don't know what would have happened if I'd stopped to help that person in the road. I don't know what those men wanted. My car, my purse, something worse. The coordinated nature of it all is what terrifies me the most. The way they work together, the way they set their trap. I've changed a lot of things since that night. I switched to day shifts only. I bought pepper spray. I keep one in my car and one in my purse. I've taken a self-defense class. I've changed my route home. I always check my surroundings before getting in or out of my car. But the worst part is that feeling of safety I used to have is gone. Pine Grove doesn't feel like the same town anymore. I catch myself looking over my shoulder constantly. I flinch when someone walks too close to me on the street. I can't drive down Maple Street without my hands starting to shake. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, trying the same trick on someone else. Someone who might not have had the gut feeling I did. Someone who might have stopped to help. So I guess that's why I'm finally sharing this. If you're ever driving late at night and see something that doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. Keep your doors locked. Don't stop if you're alone. Call for help from a safe distance. That split-second decision not to stop probably saved my life. I just hope sharing this might save someone else's too. Story 17. I've been sitting on this experience for weeks now, trying to convince myself it was all just a crazy hallucination from sleep deprivation or heat stroke. But I know what I saw. I know what happened to me, and I need to tell someone, even if no one believes me. Last month I was driving cross-country from LA to Denver. My sister had just had her second baby, and I'd promised to help out for a few weeks. I decided to make a road trip out of it instead of flying. Seemed like a good idea at the time. I'd always wanted to see more of the Southwest anyway. The first day went fine. I stayed overnight at a Holiday Inn in Vegas, then headed out early the next morning, figuring I'd make it to Salt Lake City by evening. I had my route all planned out. Northeast through Nevada, then up into Utah. Around noon, I was crossing this super remote stretch of Nevada desert, like nothing for miles kind of remote, just heat waves shimmering off the asphalt and scrubby desert in every direction. I had the AC blasting, but it was still hot as hell, the kind of heat that makes everything feel slightly unreal. I was listening to a playlist I'd made for the trip when the music started cutting out. At first, I thought it was just spotty cell service, but then this weird static came through. And in between the bursts of static, I could hear fragments of something else. A radio broadcast, I think. A man's voice, warm and enthusiastic, talking about someplace called Echo Hollow and their annual homecoming festival. There was this old-timey music playing in the background too. I tried changing stations, even switched to the FM band. But that voice kept breaking through. Echo Hollow welcomes you. Traditions since 1952. A community that never forgets. It was bizarre, like some radio signal from the past was bleeding through. Just as I was about to give up and switch to one of the podcasts I'd downloaded, I spotted a billboard on the side of the road. It was weathered, sun-bleached, but still readable. Echo Hollow, 5 miles, where memories echo forever. There was a faded painting of a small town nestled in a valley. I checked my GPS. Nothing showed up for any town nearby, just the highway stretching through empty desert. I double-checked my paper map too. Yes, I still bring those on road trips. Nothing called Echo Hollow anywhere. But then I noticed something weird. About a quarter mile ahead, there was an unmarked turnoff, a paved road, actually well maintained despite not being on any map. I slowed down as I approached it. The static on the radio got louder, and I could swear I heard the announcer say, "We're waiting for you, traveler. Turn right ahead." I still can't explain why I took that turn. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the heat was getting to me. But I did. I turned onto that unmarked road, and within seconds, my GPS completely lost signal. The screen went blank, then rebooted, but couldn't find satellites. The road wound through some low hills I hadn't even noticed from the highway. After about 10 minutes of driving, the landscape suddenly changed. The barren desert gave way to these green, shady trees. The temperature seemed to drop by at least 15 degrees. And then, as I came around a bend, I saw it, Echo Hollow. It was like driving straight into the 1950s. The town looked like something from an old postcard. Neat little houses with white picket fences, a main street with old-fashioned storefronts, vintage cars parked along the curb. There were people walking around in clothes that seemed not quite modern. I remember thinking this must be some kind of theme town, you know? Like one of those tourist traps designed to look retro. But there weren't any tourists. Just normal-looking people going about their day, though they all turned to look at my car as I drove past. I followed the main street until I saw a sign for the Echo Hollow Inn, a 3-story Victorian building painted this pale blue color with white trim. I was getting pretty freaked out by now, but I figured I'd stop and ask for directions back to the highway. Plus, I needed to use a bathroom and get some water. The lobby of the inn was all polished wood and antique furniture. There was this old ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. Behind the front desk was a woman maybe in her 50s, with her hair in this perfect 1950s style updo. When she saw me, she smiled like she'd been expecting me. "Sarah Mitchell," she said. Not a question, a statement. "We've been expecting you." I almost ran right then. How the hell did she know my name? I hadn't made any reservations. I hadn't told anyone I was coming this way. I hadn't even known this place existed until 30 minutes ago. "There must be some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't have a reservation. I just need directions back to the highway." She laughed like I'd said something funny. "Oh, we don't take reservations, dear. We just always know when someone's coming." She pulled out this old-fashioned guest book and a fountain pen. "But you'll be staying with us tonight, won't you? It's getting late, and the next town is quite a drive." I glanced at my watch. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but when I looked out the window, the light had changed. It looked like early evening now. That's when I started to feel really uneasy, like something fundamental about reality had shifted. But what could I do? I was tired, confused, and honestly a little afraid to get back in my car and drive through the desert as night was apparently falling. So I signed the guest book and took the key she offered me. "Dinner is served in the dining room at 6, she said. "The whole town will be there. We don't get many visitors, especially this close to the festival." My room was on the 2nd floor, facing the town square. It was charming in an old-fashioned way. 4-poster bed, floral wallpaper, a basin and pitcher on the dresser alongside modern plumbing in the bathroom. I tried my cell phone. No service. The landline in the room just gave me a strange buzzing sound when I picked it up. I spent a couple hours trying to convince myself that everything was fine. I was just in some quirky little town that somehow wasn't on any maps. The woman at the desk had probably seen my name on my luggage tag or something, and the time, well, maybe my watch was wrong. Around 6, I went down to the dining room. It was packed with people, all dressed like they were going to a church social in the 50s. When I walked in, the whole room went quiet for a moment, then erupted in friendly greetings. People made space for me at a long table, introducing themselves, asking where I was from, telling me how glad they were that I'd found my way to Echo Hollow. The food was amazing, home-cooked stuff like pot roast and mashed potatoes. Everyone was so friendly, but something felt rehearsed about it all, like they'd had this exact dinner with countless travelers before me. And they kept talking about the festival, how excited they were that I'd be here for it, what an honor it was. After dinner, I decided to take a walk around town, hoping to clear my head and maybe find a way to get cell service. The town was pretty at night, with old-fashioned street lamps casting pools of light. People nodded and smiled as I passed, always calling me by name. "Evening, Sarah." "Beautiful night, isn't it, Sarah?" "So glad you're joining us, Sarah." I ended up at the central plaza where there was this tall stone obelisk. People were placing flowers around its base. As I got closer, I realized it was some kind of memorial, covered in hundreds, maybe thousands of names, each with a year beside it. At the top was an inscription, "To the travelers who have contributed to our community." I started reading some of the names. Robert Johnson, 1953. Maria Gonzalez, 1967, David Chen, 1988. The list went on, right up to the present year. And then, near the bottom, freshly carved into the stone, I saw it. Sarah Mitchell, 2023, my own name, with this year's date. I backed away so fast I nearly fell over. An elderly man who'd been placing flowers at the base looked up at me and smiled. "First time seeing your name on the memorial?" he asked, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "What is this?" I demanded. "How is my name on there? I've never been here before." He looked confused. "This memorial lists everyone who's ever passed through Echo Hollow. Been here since the beginning. Your name appeared this morning, just like everyone else's does when they're on their way." I ran back to the inn, my heart pounding. I needed to get out of this place right now. But when I went to grab my car keys, they weren't in my purse where I'd left them. I tore the room apart looking for them, but they were just gone. I was too scared to go back downstairs and confront the innkeeper. Instead, I pushed a chair against the door, lay down on the bed fully clothed, and somehow eventually fell into a restless sleep. I woke up to the sound of music and voices. When I looked out my window, the town had transformed overnight. Colorful banners hung between buildings. A stage had been set up in the plaza. People were dressed in what looked like ceremonial clothes, all white with blue sashes. When I went downstairs, the innkeeper was wearing one of these outfits. She had a blue sash laid out on the counter for me. "The festival begins at noon," she said. "You'll need to wear this. Participation is mandatory for all residents and visitors." I told her I wasn't participating in anything. I just wanted my car keys back so I could leave. She gave me this sad look, like she'd heard it all before. "No one leaves on festival day, Sarah. It's tradition. Besides, all roads lead back to Echo Hollow today." I didn't believe her. I ran outside, ignoring her calls after me. I was going to find my car and get the hell out of there, with or without the keys. I'd hotwire the damn thing if I had to, but my car wasn't where I'd parked it. In its place was a sign that read, "Echo Hollow welcomes you home." I ran down the street toward where I thought the road out of town should be, but after 20 minutes of running, I somehow ended up back at the central plaza. I tried another direction, same result. It was like the town was folding in on itself, all paths leading back to that damn obelisk with my name on it. By noon, the whole town had gathered in the plaza. I was exhausted, terrified, and completely lost. The elderly man from the night before found me sitting on a bench, my head in my hands. "It's easier if you don't fight it," he said gently. "We all tried at first." "What is happening to me?" I begged him. "What is this place?" He sat beside me and sighed. Echo Hollow was a real town once, small but thriving. Then in 1952, they did those nuclear tests out in the desert. We weren't supposed to be affected. They told us we were outside the danger zone. But something happened. The town was silenced, not destroyed, not exactly, just shifted to a different frequency. What does that mean? Are you saying you're all ghosts? He shook his head. Not ghosts, echoes, resonant echoes of people and places. We exist in a fold of reality that most people pass right by. But sometimes, people like you tune in. You hear our broadcast. You see our sign. You turn off your path and onto ours. And then what? You trap them here? You steal their cars and add their names to your creepy memorial? We don't trap anyone, he said, sounding hurt. We welcome them. We need them. Each new traveler strengthens our signal, keeps us from fading away completely, and in return they become part of something eternal, part of our community. Before I could respond, the music swelled. The townspeople formed a circle around the obelisk and began to sing. It was the strangest, most beautiful sound I've ever heard, like hundreds of voices blending into one perfect harmony. And as they sang, I started to feel different, lighter somehow, like I was becoming less substantial. I looked down at my hands and could see the bench through them, just slightly. I wasn't disappearing exactly, but changing. My consciousness seemed to be expanding, connecting with others. I could feel the thoughts and memories of everyone in Echo Hollow flowing into me and mine into them. I tried to fight it. I screamed and thrashed, but my voice just became part of the song. And then I understood what was happening. I wasn't being erased, I was being absorbed, becoming part of Echo Hollow's collective consciousness. That's the last clear memory I have of being just me. What happened after is harder to explain. I remember fragments, welcoming other travelers, singing at other festivals, watching as new names appeared on the memorial. I don't know how I escaped. I woke up 3 days later in my car, parked at a rest stop just outside Salt Lake City. My GPS worked fine. My phone had service. Everything seemed normal, except I have these memories that don't feel like mine. I know things about people I've never met. Sometimes I catch myself humming that festival song, and sometimes, late at night when I'm driving and the radio starts to static, I swear I can hear voices calling me back to Echo Hollow. I've looked for information about nuclear tests in Nevada in the 50s. They happened. I've searched for any record of a town called Echo Hollow. Nothing. I've even tried to find that turnoff again, but I can't remember exactly where it was. All I know is that somewhere in the Nevada desert there's a town that isn't supposed to exist, and somehow part of me is still there. So if you're driving cross-country and you hear strange interference on your radio, whatever you do, don't turn off the highway. Don't follow unmarked roads. And if you see a sign for Echo Hollow, keep driving. For your own sake, just keep driving. Story 18. I've been a driver for most of my adult life, and I always thought the stories were just that. Stories. The kind you tell to keep yourself awake during those endless overnight hauls when the white lines start to hypnotize you and your eyelids get heavy. My grandfather was a trucker too, and he used to tell me about the highway people when I was growing up. I'd laugh it off as an old man's attempt to scare his grandson. "They watch from the tree lines, John," he'd say. "They've been watching us since the first roads were cut through their territory." That was before May 17th, 2011, before everything changed. I'm writing this because I need someone to believe me. The police think I ran off. My wife probably thinks I abandoned her. The truth is much worse. It was supposed to be a routine run. Birmingham to Phoenix, a route I'd done dozens of times before. I was making good time that evening. The traffic was light, and my rig was running smooth. I remember feeling pretty good, thinking I might even get to Phoenix ahead of schedule. Around 9:30 that night, I pulled into the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza near Oklahoma City. Nothing special about it, just your typical truck stop with the usual amenities: gas, showers, a small diner, and a convenience store. I needed to fuel up, grab something to eat, and catch a few hours of sleep before hitting the road again early the next morning. I remember checking my watch as I pulled in, 9:38 p.m. I logged it in my book like I always do. Force of habit after 20+ years on the road. I shut down the engine, grabbed my wallet, and stepped out of the cab. The air felt different that night. That's the first thing I recall that seemed off. It was May in Oklahoma, should have been warm and maybe a bit humid. Instead, there was this unusual chill, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I chalked it up to a cold front moving through and started walking toward the main building. I'd taken maybe 10 steps when I heard it, a soft, almost melodic humming coming from somewhere behind the lot, where the pavement ends and the trees begin. I stopped and turned, squinting into the darkness. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, between the gaps in the tree line, I caught glimpses of what looked like blue-white light, pulsing rhythmically. My first thought was that it might be some kind of emergency vehicle with its lights on, maybe responding to something on the access road behind the plaza. But there was no pattern to it like police or ambulance lights, just this steady, pulsing glow that seemed to be getting brighter. I found myself walking toward it. I can't explain why. It wasn't like I consciously decided to investigate. It was more like my feet started moving on their own. With each step, the humming got louder, and I felt this pressure building in my ears, like when you're driving up a mountain and need to pop them. As I got closer to the edge of the lot, I remembered my grandfather's stories. I hadn't thought about them in years, but suddenly they were front and center in my mind. I pulled out my phone and called Ray, an old buddy of mine, who'd heard the same stories from his uncle. "Ray," I said when he picked up, "you remember those stories our folks used to tell us about the highway people?" He laughed. "Jesus, John, you been drinking?" "I'm serious, man. I think I'm looking at one right now. They're real, Ray." "What are you talking about? Where are you?" Before I could answer, my phone made this horrible screeching noise, like feedback from a microphone, but 1,000 times worse. I had to pull it away from my ear. When I looked at the screen, it was glitching out, the display flickering with strange symbols I'd never seen before. That's when I heard the tearing sound. It's hard to describe, like metal being ripped apart, but deeper, more fundamental, like something was being torn that shouldn't be torn. All the dogs in the truck plaza started howling at once, this mournful, terrified sound that made my skin crawl. I should have run back to my truck. I should have locked myself in and driven away as fast as possible, but I didn't. Instead, I walked closer, moving between two parked semis toward that pulsing light. What I saw in that gap between the trucks, I still have trouble believing it myself. There was a figure standing there, tall and unnaturally thin. Its proportions were all wrong, like someone had taken a human shape and stretched it. And its face, God, its face was smooth, almost like a mannequin's, but with this wet, reflective quality that made it look like it was covered in some kind of clear slime. When my flashlight caught its eyes, they reflected the light back like an animal's, bright yellow-green circles in that smooth, featureless face. I froze. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. The figure tilted its head, studying me, and then it smiled. There was nothing human about that smile, just a sudden crack appearing in that smooth face, widening to reveal what looked like dozens of tiny needle-like teeth. It raised one long, jointed arm, too many joints, bending in places where a human arm shouldn't bend, and pointed toward the tree line. Behind it, I could see now that the pulsing light wasn't coming from any emergency vehicle. It was coming from what looked like a tear in the air itself, a vertical slit about 7 feet tall that leaked that blue-white light. The pressure in my ears was unbearable now. I felt something warm trickling down the side of my face and realized my ears were bleeding. The figure took a step toward me, still pointing at that tear in reality. That's when I finally broke free of whatever was holding me in place. I turned to run, but my legs felt like they were moving through molasses. Everything was slow, dreamlike. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, so loud it seemed to echo across the parking lot. I was almost back to the well-lit area of the plaza when something grabbed my hat from behind. I reached up instinctively, clutching at the brim, my fingernails digging into the band as I tried to hold onto it. There was a sharp pain at the back of my head as several hairs were ripped out, and then my hat was gone. I didn't look back. I ran toward the main building, gasping for breath. But when I reached for the door handle, my hand passed right through it. I tried again, and again my hand just went through the solid metal like it wasn't there. I turned around, my back against the door that I couldn't touch, and saw the figure standing at the edge of the light. It was holding my hat in one of those wrong-jointed hands, turning it over as if examining it. Then it looked up at me, that horrible crack of a smile widening, and tossed my hat toward the tree line. The hat didn't fall to the ground. It arced upward, impossibly, and lodged itself high in the branches of a tree. The figure pointed at me, then at the tear in the air that was now expanding, growing wider. The humming had become a deep, vibrating drone that I could feel in my chest, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that it wanted me to go through that tear. I tried to scream for help, but no sound came out. I could see other drivers through the windows of the truck stop, moving around inside, completely unaware of what was happening just outside. I pounded on the door, but my fists made no impact. It was like I was already halfway somewhere else. The figure was approaching now, moving with a fluid grace that wasn't human. Each step it took seemed to distort the air around it, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. And with each step, I felt myself being pulled toward it, drawn by some invisible force. I made one last desperate attempt to escape. I ran along the front of the building, trying every door, every window, but I couldn't interact with any of them. It was like I was a ghost, unable to touch the physical world. The parking lot lights began to flicker and then went out one by one, plunging the area into darkness except for that blue-white glow. In that eerie light, I saw more figures emerging from between the trucks, 3, then 5, then dozens of them, all with those smooth, wet faces and reflective eyes, all moving toward me with that same unnatural grace. The last thing I remember clearly is being surrounded by them, those long-fingered hands reaching for me from all sides. The tear in the air was directly behind me now, and I could feel its pull like a powerful wind at my back. One of the figures leaned in close, its face inches from mine, and I caught a smell like ozone and rotting vegetation. It spoke, not with a voice, but directly into my mind. A single word, repeated over and over, "Come." Then I was falling backward, into that tear in reality, into that blue-white light. The sensation was like being pulled apart atom by atom, excruciating beyond description. I screamed, but there was no sound, only the endless drone of that impossible doorway as it swallowed me whole. I don't know where I went. I don't know how I got back. My memories of what happened after I fell through that tear are fragmented, distorted, flashes of places that couldn't exist, of things that shouldn't be possible. Time didn't work right there. What felt like years might have been minutes, or vice versa. All I know is that I eventually woke up in a hospital 3 states away, with no identification and no memory of how I'd gotten there. The doctors said I was suffering from severe dehydration and exposure, that I'd been found wandering along a desert highway by a passing motorist. They didn't believe me when I told them what happened. Nobody does. According to the official record, I disappeared from that truck plaza and reappeared 8 months later in the New Mexico desert. They think I had some kind of breakdown, that I ran away from my life for reasons of my own. But I know what I saw. I know what took me. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear that drone, feel that pull, and see those reflective eyes watching me from the corners of the room. They're real, the highway people. My grandfather was right all along. They're out there, watching from the tree lines, waiting in the darkness between the lights. And once they notice you, once they single you out, they never really let you go. I haven't driven a truck since that night. I can't bring myself to get back on the open road. But sometimes I dream about my hat, still stuck in that tree behind the Blue Mesa Truck Plaza, the inside band marked with my desperate fingernail scratches as I tried to hold on to the last piece of my normal life before being dragged into somewhere else.